Martial Peak. Chapter 59-59. Victory. The Black Ink Cult was divided into 8 chapters, which were Heaven, Earth, Profound, Dawn, Night, Space, Flood, and Barren. Each of the chapter masters was among the most powerful cultivators in the world. Their strength was unrivaled, but due to the limits in this world, they were unable to break through the Immortal Ascension boundary. Although all of them were at the peak Immortal Ascension boundary, it didn't mean they were equally powerful. Some were stronger than others. Among the 8 chapter masters, Yubu Zhou, the Heaven chapter master, was acknowledged to be the most powerful. It was said that he was born with a special constitution, and he had cultivated an amazing secret art. Therefore, even though he had been stuck at the peak of the Immortal Ascension boundary for years, his power still increased steadily. Since the 8 chapter masters had engaged in life and death battles with the masters from the light spirit religion, they were replaced frequently. There would be all new chapter masters every 20 to 30 years on average. However, over the last 100 years, Yubu Zhou had managed to hold on to his position as the Heaven chapter master, with no one capable of challenging him. Whenever he fought the masters from the light spirit religion, he would always end up being the winner. The Earth chapter master had contended with him before, and he was defeated in 3 moves, which went to show how formidable Yubu Zhou was. Nevertheless, such a master was attacked. When the fight took place, the Black Ink Cult members thought the light spirit religion had launched a sneak attack on them. But when they arrived at the scene, they were dumbfounded. That was because on the battlefield, Yubu Zhou, who was fully pushing his aura, was locked in an intense fight with an alluring figure. The woman was surrounded by a blood mist, but despite the distance, all could smell the metallic tinge wafting from her. The person battling Yubu Zhou was none other than the Night Chapter Master, Xueqi. At that moment, no one knew why the 2 chapter masters were engaged in such an intense battle. Nonetheless, when Yubu Zhou claimed that Xueqi was a traitor, their expressions changed drastically. As of late, many Black Ink Cult masters had been assassinated, but they couldn't find any traces at the scenes. Therefore, they had no idea who the culprit was. With that said, the Black Ink Cult masters were not fools, so they realized that there was a traitor on their side. The traitor had to be the one who secretly killed the other Black Ink Cult masters. However, none of them had expected the traitor to be the Night Chapter Master. As such, when Yubu Zhou made such a claim, many still couldn't believe it. Nevertheless, they soon saw something even more unbelievable, for Yubu Zhou, who was believed to be the most powerful cultivator in the Black Ink Cult, was at a clear disadvantage in his fight against Xueqi. Faced with the woman's overbearing methods, Yubu Zhou was powerless to counterattack. No one ever imagined that Xueqi was so powerful. The Black Ink Cult masters at the scene wanted to stop them. Regardless of the truth, the 2 chapter masters shouldn't try to kill each other. They could find out if Xueqi was the traitor later. However, the moment they made a move, 4 figures emerged from the darkness and stopped them. They instantly recognized that these people were Xueqi's blood slaves, whose names were Qi, Mei, Wang, and Liang. They were orphans who had been following Xueqi since they were children. Xueqi taught them the blood Tao and planted a secret technique in their bodies, ensuring that their powers would increase in tandem with her. Therefore, the bond between Xueqi and her slaves was unbreakable. The 4 blood slaves were supposed to be in the 2nd order Immortal Ascension boundary because their master, Xueqi, was in the 3rd order. Their cultivation couldn't surpass her own. Nonetheless, at this moment, all were awestruck by the powers that the blood slaves showcased. That was because the blood slaves were already in the 3rd order Immortal Ascension boundary. Furthermore, they had been living together since young, and they had mastered many combined attack techniques. As they joined forces, they were able to stop more than 20 Black Ink Cult masters from moving forward. With no one getting in her way, Xueqi became increasingly ruthless. Yubu Zhou was covered in blood, and it seemed that he would lose his life at any moment. At the most critical moment, he roared as thick black ink strength billowed from his body and engulfed him in an instant. Following that, his body started swelling as sarcomas appeared on his figure. He stank terribly, and his aura soon broke through the Immortal Ascension boundary shackles and reached an entirely new realm. An unsuspecting Xueqi was struck by his fist, and she almost exploded. However, Yubu Zhou was only able to make one move because after his aura broke through the Immortal Ascension boundary's shackles, the worlds will started targeting him. He howled in pain as his body continued swelling until he exploded into a blood mist, not even leaving scraps of his corpse behind. In an instant, thick black ink strength swept out. The fight sent a shockwave across the entire world. The powerful Heaven Chapter Master was attacked by the Night Chapter Master. The Heaven Chapter Master only managed to defeat the other party by transforming into an apostle. Nevertheless, he paid a terrible price, for not long after he transformed into an apostle, he was destroyed by the world's will. Meanwhile, Xueqi went missing, and her blood slaves fled amidst the chaos. The mess they left behind made the Black Ink Cult Masters feel heartbroken. Apart from Yu Buzhou's amazing power, they were more concerned about Xueqi's cultivation. According to the witnesses at the scene, Yu Buzhou was totally suppressed by Xueqi. If not for the fact that he was at a complete disadvantage and that his life was already at stake, he wouldn't have been forced to transform into an apostle. In other words, Xueqi was significantly more powerful than Yu Buzhou. It was inconceivable. Although Xueqi could be considered one of the most powerful cultivators in the world, she wasn't comparable to Yu Buzhou, especially in a frontal clash. How did she manage to gain the upper hand, then? Also, the blood slaves' cultivation indirectly proved how powerful Xueqi was. The blood slaves were closely tied to Xueqi as their strength would always grow in tandem with hers. Furthermore, their cultivation would never surpass that of Xueqi. When Xueqi was in the third order immortal ascension boundary back then, the 4 blood slaves were only in the second order. Nevertheless, the powers they showcased during the battle proved that they were already in the third order immortal ascension boundary. The truth was revealed before everyone's eyes. Xueqi wanted to kill Yu Buzhou in secret, but due to the latter's incredible heritage, she wasn't able to achieve her goal. A battle then broke out, after which the Black Ink Cult Masters arrived and witnessed the fight. After looking into the matter, they realized that when the Black Ink Cult members were killed back then, there were traces of Xueqi or her blood slaves appearing nearby. When the city lord of North River City was killed, Xueqi was in the city. However, no one doubted her at that time. There was no denying that Xueqi had betrayed the Black Ink Cult, but no one knew why the Night Chapter Master decided to do so. When those from the Light Spirit religion got wind of it, they were equally puzzled. They initially thought that it was some fake news spread by the Black Ink Cult. Only Li Fei Yu, who had been working closely with Xueqi in secret, knew that it wasn't misinformation. All of those things had indeed happened. All the same, she was shocked that Xueqi was even more powerful than she had imagined. On that night, she already realized that she was no longer a match for Xueqi, but she didn't expect the woman to be able to kill Yu Buzhou. The piece of news was eventually verified to be true, and the Light Spirit Religion's managers celebrated. Initially, Yu Buzhou was the biggest obstacle to the Spirit Religion's crusade. Even the 8 Order Lords didn't have the confidence to defeat him. Although the Holy Sun was powerful, he was still young and inexperienced. Therefore, he couldn't possibly defeat Yu Buzhou. Much to their surprise, Xueqi had removed this obstacle for them. At that moment, those from the Spirit Religion saw Xueqi in a different light, thinking that she must have come to her senses and decided to side with them to save the world. They started looking for Xueqi, and those from the Black Ink Cult were doing the same. However, after the fight that night, Xueqi and her blood slaves went missing, as though they had vanished into thin air. They were adept at killing people in secret as they were the best assassins in the world. Therefore, they were able to disguise and hide themselves impeccably. If they wanted to disappear, no one could find them. There was no doubt that Xueqi was recuperating. Yu Buzhou's attack was immensely powerful after he turned into an apostle, so although Xueqi had survived, she must be badly injured. As such, she couldn't kick up a storm in a short time. Or so those from the Black Ink Cult thought. In truth, the assassinations continued happening in an even more efficient manner. In just several days, more than 20 Black Ink Cult Masters were killed, each of them in charge of different battlefields. After their deaths, the Black Ink Cult soldiers became virtually leaderless. Those from the Spirit Religion seized the chance and marched forward. They initially had to pay a price to win the fights, but now, they could achieve their goals with ease. 6 days after Yu Buzhou was killed, another shocking incident occurred that unnerved the Black Ink Cult Masters. That was because another chapter master was killed inside the Black Ink Cult's main camp. No one saw who made the move, they only felt an immense power erupt inside the largest tent before disappearing. When nearby Black Ink Cult members came over to investigate, all they saw was the chapter master had been decapitated. The murderer entered and left the camp without anyone noticing, as though they were a ghost. The Black Ink Cult Masters at the scene were horrified as they felt cold sweat gather all over their bodies. They felt as though an invisible blade was resting on their necks, ready to reap their heads at any moment. Following the incident, the black ink cult's morale collapsed. Since those in leadership roles were being targeted, no one dared to step up to take charge, for that would only make them the targets for the assassin. As more and more chapter masters were killed, the Immortal Ascension boundary masters from the black ink cult started running away. The soldiers, who had been contending with the light spirit religion, became leaderless in an instant. Without any masters in charge, they couldn't put up a decent fight. In contrast, those from the light spirit religion were more united than ever. As they continued to win more battles, they became increasingly assertive and high-spirited. At this point, there was no mystery as to who the winner would be. Now, those from the light spirit religion just had to kill as many black ink cultists as possible. They initially expected the war to last for several years, but the dust settled in barely a month. 1 month after those from the light spirit religion set off from Dawn City, they managed to surround the black ink abyss. It could be said that the spirit religion was in control of 99% of the world now. Only a few of the black ink cult masters remained around the black ink abyss, still obstinately resisting. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5960. Following Orders. The war was intense as the remaining masters of the black ink cult stubbornly persevered. However, there was a huge gap between the two sides now. A lot of black ink cult masters had lost their lives in just the last month, so how were the rest supposed to be a match for the light spirit religion? As the light spirit religion soldiers marched forward, those from the black ink cult were left with limited space to live. Eventually, some of them could no longer bear the pressure, so they turned to look at the black ink abyss. Rather than waiting for death, they decided to dive into the black ink abyss and seek a chance to survive. However, when the black ink cult masters with this plan in mind reached the black ink abyss, they realized several figures were already waiting there. The person in front was an alluring woman with a curvy figure. The woman was painting her nails with some liquid made from flowers, making them look as red as blood. She appeared at ease and was even humming some unknown tune. As the wind whistled, this sight beside the bottomless black ink abyss was quite eerie. "Xueqi!" someone exclaimed. The person blocking their way was none other than the Night Chapter Master, Xueqi, who had been missing for quite a while. She disappeared after the fight with Yu Buzhou, and no one knew where she had gone. Nevertheless, Yu Buzhou's last attack before his death was powerful, so everyone assumed that Su Ji was badly injured and had to recuperate somewhere in secret. They didn't expect the woman to be waiting just next to the black ink abyss. Of course, she was not alone. Standing behind her were Qi, Mei, Wang, and Liang, her blood slaves. They remained silent and stood there with dispassionate expressions, but no one would underestimate them. That was because the 4 of them were in the Third Order Immortal Ascension boundary. Back then, the 4 of them had stopped more than 20 Immortal Ascension boundary masters in their tracks. Just then, a black ink cult master emerged from the crowd and looked at Xueqi. "Have you betrayed us, Senior Xueqi?" Xueqi continued tending to her nails as she replied impassively without lifting her head. "Nonsense. Where did you hear it from?" The person didn't expect Xueqi to deny the charge, but he still said furiously, "Since you didn't betray us, why did you kill so many of our people? You even murdered Senior Yu Buzhou. If not. He was so agitated that he couldn't finish his sentence. If not for the fact that Xueqi had been killing their people in secret, the black ink cult wouldn't have been defeated so swiftly. Over the past month, too many black ink cult masters had been assassinated, while the death of Yu Buzhou had an especially big impact on their strength and morale. Well, when Xueqi was done with her manicure, she spread her fingers and had a look. Nevertheless, she didn't seem satisfied as she said with a frown, "I'm just following orders." "What do you mean?" All of them were shocked. Xueqi could be said to be the most powerful cultivator in the world now, so who could even give her orders? The woman swept a glance over them and instantly realized their intention. "I suggest that you don't try entering the black ink abyss." The person who spoke earlier furrowed his brow. "Are you here to stop all of us from entering the black ink abyss?" In response, Xueqi nodded. "Why?" asked the person angrily. Those from the light spirit religion had surrounded the black ink abyss, so diving into the abyss was their only chance to survive. Much to their surprise, Xueqi got in the way. "As I said, I'm just following orders," Xueqi replied. Seeing that the woman repeated her words, the person asked grimly, "May I know who has been giving you orders, Senior?" Xueqi shook her head. "There's no need for you to know." After interacting with that certain someone for a while, she came to realize that his existence was probably taboo in this world. Therefore, she felt it best to keep his existence a secret. What if we insist on entering the black ink abyss? Someone stepped forward just then. He was afraid of Xueqi as well, but he believed they could still achieve their goal since they had many people on their side. Xueqi took a look at him, and her figure seemed to blur the next moment. When her body solidified again, she raised her hands and glanced at her red nails. With a smile she nodded and said, "This color really is the best." The smell of blood permeated the air. The crowd instantly realized that something was off, and when they turned to look at the person who spoke earlier, they saw him covering his chest with his hands. His face had turned pale as he staggered before collapsing to the ground. Blood spurted from his wound and dyed the ground red. A second-order Immortal Ascension Boundary Master was killed just like that, with no one even seeing how Xueqi made a move. "Go back now," Xueqi muttered. Despite her calm and casual tone, all of them stepped back in horror. Even the 2 chapter masters present didn't dare to deal with her directly. After hesitating for a moment, the 2 chapter masters waved their hands and declared, "Let's go." They led the Black Ink cult masters back the way they came. Initially, they believed that diving into the Black Ink abyss would be a way out for them. But now, it seemed that they had no choice but to try breaking through the Light Spirit Religion's siege. As Xueqi watched the Black Ink cult masters leave, she stretched her back and looked down at the Black Ink abyss. Her master told her to stay there and stop anyone from entering the Black Ink abyss. Therefore, she had to execute his command no matter what. As for killing those people, she was too lazy to make a move, so she would just let the Light Spirit Religion deal with them. She thought that she had done a good job so far, so she decided to ask her master for a reward when she saw him again. At that moment, she couldn't help licking her lip. The auras of the 4 blood slaves swayed slightly behind Xueqi as she said dispassionately, "Go on." The 4 of them instantly charged forward and surrounded the dead Black Ink cult master before casting their secret techniques. Soon, a blood mist billowed from his corpse as the blood slaves devoured everything. In the past, Xueqi wouldn't miss the blood essence of a second-order Immortal Ascension Boundary Master. After all, the more blood essence she refined, the more powerful she became. However, after getting several rewards from her master, she was no longer interested in the blood essence of ordinary cultivators. Now, her only wish was that her master would give her 1 drop of his true blood essence one day. The war intensified while the battle inside the Black Ink abyss commenced. After leaving Dawn City, Xueqi didn't head straight to the Black Ink abyss. Instead, he secretly killed many Black Ink cult masters to clear the obstacles for the Light Spirit Religion's campaign. He also found Xueqi, who was recuperating, and he lent her a helping hand. If not for Xueqi's assistance, Xueqi wouldn't have recovered in just a few days after she was struck by Yu Buzhou, who had turned into an apostle. This made the woman feel even more grateful towards Xueqi. Presently, Xueqi was running for his life at the bottom of the Black Ink abyss as the apostles came at him in all directions. He was still at the peak of the Immortal Ascension boundary. However, a warm stream was moving around in his entire figure as it melted away the shackles restricting him. This was the power given to him by Mu, and it could also be considered the essence of the world's will that could help shatter the Immortal Ascension boundary shackles and help the cultivator reach the next realm. Nevertheless, Xueqi couldn't use this power as he pleased as it was only allowed in this place. That was because Mo had left behind a hidden hand here. The source piece sealed in the profound source gate allowed the bottom of the Black Ink abyss to form a self-contained world. In this place, even though the apostles acquired powers that transcended the Immortal Ascension boundary, they wouldn't attract the hostility of the world's will. That was the reason the apostles had never left the Black Ink abyss. Although they had lost their sentience, they still had their instincts and knew that they would only be safe by staying in the Black Ink abyss. Previously, they were infuriated by Xueqi, so they chased after him as the latter left the Black Ink abyss. Nevertheless, as soon as they crossed the boundary of life and death, they were instantly killed. With so many apostles chasing after one, any ordinary Immortal Ascension boundary master would have been doomed. However, Xueqi had a powerful heritage and incredible methods. His figure was elusive as he managed to survive in the hostile environment. The speed of the warm stream quickened as Xueqi's aura rose rapidly. The shackles that restrained his power started loosening. There came a moment when he felt light all of a sudden, as though he had broken through his limits. His aura became violent as an air blast swept across the place. From the Immortal Ascension boundary, he made it to the Transcendent realm. To the cultivators in this independent world, It was a dream they had been longing to grasp for as long as anyone could remember. However, to Xueqi, it was just experiencing a realm he had reached before for the second time. He suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned around as his spear radiated a cold light. The power of the transcendent realm swirled around the weapon. Just then, an apostle leapt into the air and pounced on Xueqi, who raised his spear and thrust it into the opponent's eye. The head exploded with a boom as Xueqi retracted his spear and pushed it out again. At that instant, his spear shadow swept across the abyss like a torrent. The apostles exploded in mid-air as their powerful auras dissipated one after another. With the foundation of a ninth-order open heaven realm master, Xueqi could easily kill these apostles, who had lost their sentience, as long as they were in the same realm. Blood spread across the ground as black ink strength surged. Xueqi remained in the same spot as he repeatedly thrust and retracted his spear. Soon, he was surrounded by many carcasses. Over the years, countless apostles were created in the black ink abyss. If no one killed them, their number would continue to increase as time passed. Nevertheless, they were now being killed off by Xueqi using his spear. The spear soon broke in half. It was a weapon Xueqi took from a black ink cult master, so it naturally couldn't bear such an intense fight for long. Despite having no weapon, Xueqi still had his fists. Although his dragon vein had been suppressed, the power he could access increased after he ascended to the transcendent realm. More and more apostles collapsed to the ground. There came a moment when Xueqi stood above a mountain of carcasses with no more living creatures around him. He shook the blood off his hands and stepped down from the mountain of corpses. It was dead silent in the depths of the black ink abyss, with no more apostles around to growl and howl. Xueqi identified the appropriate direction and headed straight towards the profound source gate. In the meantime, the war above had come to an end. Those from the light spirit religion had surrounded the entire area, and given the difference between their powers, those from the black ink cult were helpless to counterattack as they were quickly killed off. Everyone cheered for the Holy Sun and chanted his name. At that moment, his reputation reached an unprecedented level. The citizens of the primordial world had been oppressed and tortured by the black ink cult for a long time, and while the spirit religion had been fighting them for many years, they hadn't been able to destroy them. Nevertheless, 1 month after the Holy Sun was made known to the public, he led the spirit religion to destroy the greatest evil in the world, just as what was described in the prophecy. The Holy Sun was indeed incredible. Martial Peak. Chapter 5961, Profound Source Gate. The young Holy Sun didn't know what to do. After Xueqi brought him back to the spirit religion, he started cultivating in secret and didn't come into contact with the outside world for 10 years. The moment he was made known to the public, he had to lead the light spirit religion's soldiers to launch the final battle against the black ink cult, just like the Savior described in the prophecy. It could be said that he was still puzzled as to what was going on, but it didn't stop him from enjoying the victory after an intense battle. As everyone looked at him, he raised his hand and balled up a fist. In an instant, all of them stopped cheering and stared fixedly at him. He then shouted, "May the light prevail." After a moment of silence, the crowd cheered even louder. Standing in front of them, the Saintess and Li Fei Yu exchanged glances and smiled. Initially, they decided to make the fake Holy Sun known to the public so that the light spirit religion would have a reason to launch a war. After coming into contact with him though, they realized he was a pure-hearted and kind person. Such a person, coupled with his military achievements, was good enough to be the Holy Sun. Certainly, the real Holy Sun, who had been taking action in secret, wouldn't mind it. "Holy Sun," the Thunder Order Lord, Yu Daoqi, stepped forward. "Although we've killed most of the Black Ink cult members, some remaining ones are in front of the Black Ink abyss. Please go over and have a look to determine their life or death." The Holy Sun asked curiously, "Are some of the Black Ink cult members still alive?" Yu Daoqi replied, "They're the Night Chapter Master Xueqi and her 4 blood slaves." "It's her," the Holy Sun nodded gently. "Certainly I have to meet her. I heard that she had assassinated many Black Ink cult masters, including Yu Buzhou. If not for her help, we wouldn't have been able to win the war so easily." Regardless of what Xueqi was like in the past, she had made a huge contribution to the fight against the Black Ink cult. Therefore, the young Holy Sun was fond of her and thought that he should thank her in person. With the Holy Sun and the Saintess leading the way, the spirit religion masters set off towards the Black Ink abyss. When they arrived, they realized the atmosphere was both gloomy and tense. Xueqi and her blood slave stood there in silence while some spirit religion masters confronted them. When the masters from the spirit religion saw the Holy Sun and the others, they finally felt relieved. After Xueqi killed Yu Buzhou, there was no doubt she was the most powerful cultivator in the world. When the spirit religion's immortal ascension boundary masters faced her, they felt immensely pressured, even though Xueqi merely stood there without doing anything. The crowd parted to the sides while the Holy Sun walked up to Xueqi. Yu Daoqi secretly warned, "Be careful, Holy Sun." The Holy Sun nodded and stood in front of Xueqi before saluting her. Light Spirit Religion's Wu Ding greet Senior Xueqi. Xueqi lifted her gaze and swept a glance over him before asking with a smile, "Are you the Holy Sun?" Wu Ding scratched his head. "I think so. That's what everyone calls me." Xueqi was surprised by his somewhat childish behavior, but a moment later, she shook her head with a smile. "You're still too green." Wu Ding replied respectfully, "You have a point, Senior. I'm still a young and inexperienced cultivator, so I might make mistakes from time to time. Please forgive me if I've offended you in any way." A helpless Xueqi looked at him and sighed, "That's not what I meant." She knew that the young Holy Sun must have misunderstood something. What she meant was that compared to her inscrutable master, the young Holy Sun was still just a child. Although Yang Kai had never told her anything, she realized long ago that the true Holy Sun described in the prophecy must be her master. The young man before her eyes was only a fake that the spirit religion had used to launch a war against the Black Ink cult. Initially, she was hostile towards this man, thinking that he had snatched the glory that belonged to his master, a truth which displeased her. However, when she saw the Holy Sun's behavior for herself, she couldn't bring herself to loathe him. The Holy Sun scratched his head again. Just as he was ready to speak, Yu Daoqi bellowed all of a sudden, "Surrender without a fight, demon woman!" Xueqi turned to look at him, but she didn't have the intention of responding to him, so she glanced over at Li Feiyu and said, "Big Sister Li, are you guys planning to kill me after everything I've done for you? If that's the case, couldn't you have warned me earlier so that I could get prepared?" Li Feiyu shook her head. "That's not our intention. Don't read too much into it." The Order Lords were puzzled, feeling that there was something they were not aware of. Yu Daoqi questioned with a frown, "What do you mean?" Li Feiyu explained, "Xueqi has sided with us. Previously, the Saintess told me to contact Xueqi in secret. We have been coordinating with her so she could assassinate those Black Ink cult masters. It's because of her assistance that we've been able to march forward and destroy the enemy with ease over the past month." Hearing that, all of them were shocked. Si Kong Nan muttered, "Why have we never heard of it before?" The Saintess said with a smile, "We've decided to keep it a secret since the matter was both sensitive and of critical importance." "Forgive me." Since the Saintess had admitted to it, that must be the truth. Moreover, given the outcome, Xueqi had indeed made a huge contribution. At that moment, many of them looked at her with milder expressions. They were certainly pleased to have an ally like her. With a dark expression, Yu Daoqi said, "You've acted rashly this time, Holy Saintess. Even if you refuse to tell us about it, you shouldn't have kept it a secret from the Holy Sun. After all, he is the savior." The Holy Sun waved his hand. "It's fine. It is true that I am inexperienced and know nothing about the current situation or how to handle it. Big Sister Saintess can continue to take charge of the spirit religion's affairs." Yu Daoqi was rendered speechless, thinking that the Holy Sun was no different from a wastrel trying to avoid responsibility at this moment. After a moment of silence he followed up, "In that case you'd better leave now. You're the Night Chapter Master from the Black Ink cult. Although you've helped us a lot, we can't accept you." Xueqi replied with a smile, "I've never intended to join your religion." Yu Daoqi appeared perplexed. "Since you don't want to join us, why did you betray the Black Ink cult?" A sense of longing appeared on Xueqi's face as she replied, "Because I found a higher goal to pursue." All of them were astounded, thinking that the woman might have misspoken. It was inconceivable that a powerful woman like her had found a higher goal to pursue. Thus, she betrayed the Black Ink cult. An irritated Yu Daoqi waved his hand. "Regardless, we have nothing to do with each other from now on, and you mustn't commit any more crimes just because you're powerful. You can leave now." Xueqi shook her head. "I can't go." After a pause, she asked, "Are you planning to explore the Black Ink Abyss secrets?" Yu Daoqi nodded. "The Black Ink cult has been destroyed, but since the black ink abyss is the source of the black ink cult, we certainly have to look into it. We have to suppress and seal this place so that the black ink cult will never return.
The Order Lords nodded as it was indeed their plan. Xueqi said, "You should wait here then."
Someone told me to stay here and make sure no one enters the black ink abyss.
Yu Daoqi snapped, "Xueqi, we are magnanimous enough to let you go since you've helped us a lot, but don't reach for a yard after we've given you an inch."
Xueqi smiled charmingly. "I have my orders. If you want to enter the black ink abyss, you must kill me first." At that moment, the Saintess appeared agitated and asked, "Is he inside the black ink abyss?" Obviously, she knew who Xueqi was referring to. It's no wonder I've never heard any news from him since the war started. He entered the black ink abyss. In response, Xueqi nodded gently.
With a solemn expression, the Saintess asked, "Did he say anything else?"
Xueqi replied, "He said the bottom of the black ink abyss is extremely dangerous. I initially wanted to accompany and assist him, but he said I would only die meaninglessly if I followed him. Therefore, he ordered me to stay here and make sure no one else could get near the black ink abyss."
Upon hearing that, the Saintess nodded.
The masters from the spirit religion were puzzled while Xikongnan felt even greater pressure on his hunched back as he asked, "Holy Saintess, is there something else we're not aware of?" After they defeated the black ink cult and took charge of the entire world, they were ecstatic. However, it wasn't until this moment that they realized many things had happened in the background without them noticing. The Saintess had no idea how to explain it to them, so she could only say, "I'm not at liberty to discuss this further. Since it's that person's order, we'd better wait here."
"What do you say, Holy Sun?"
The Holy Sun nodded repeatedly. "You have a point, Big Sister Saintess." A furious Yu Daoqi glared at the young Holy Sun. He wanted to tell the young man not to be easily fooled by a woman's beauty, for that would be dangerous. All the apostles had been killed at the bottom of the black ink abyss as Xueqi walked towards the profound source gate. Soon, he arrived at his destination. It was a mysterious-looking gate that stood in an empty space. The door was carved with intricate patterns, and every one of them seemed to be the essence of numerous grand das. As Xueqi looked at the door, he suddenly realized something. The door wasn't something the humans could create. It was a precious treasure born alongside the universe. The primordial light and primordial darkness were born from this gate. The door wasn't tightly closed, but behind it, there seemed to be a dark power that was ready to burst out through the gaps at any moment. It was Mo's source. Since its source had been suppressed and sealed behind the profound source gate, it couldn't break free. However, the energy it released affected the entire black ink abyss and gave birth to the black ink cult. Mu said that the darkness of human nature, which included slaughter, conspiracy, plots and greed, could help strengthen black ink strength. Therefore, after Mo developed sentience, its power increased rapidly. That was because there has never been a lack of a dark side in human nature. As Xueqi looked at the profound source gate, he extended his hand and touched it. The next moment, his entire figure shook. A cold aura engulfed him in an instant and elicited the negative feelings he had suppressed at the bottom of his heart. He was oppressed and hunted down when he was weak, and when he was strong enough, he killed all of his opponents. All sorts of terrible memories swept through him like a tsunami. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5962. Turn of Events. When the cold aura engulfed Xueqi, all of his horrible memories emerged from the bottom of his mind and impacted his soul. Darkness started spreading in his knowledge sea. It wasn't conspicuous at first, but it soon covered a large area and continued to expand. In just a short moment, the entire knowledge sea seemed to be covered in a layer of dark fog. On a 7-colored island, Fong Tian Ci and Thunder Shadow saw some blurred images rolling in the dark fog. The images were all gray and gloomy, which were the unhappy memories of Xueqi's life. The memories kept getting shattered as though they were devoured by the dark fog. As the dark fog's power increased, it became increasingly thick. Yen Peng, who had been confined to this place for a long time, exclaimed, "What's going on? Has Sir fallen into danger?" No one responded to him. Impacted by the external stimulant, the 7-colored island started shaking as the multicolored light around it became even brighter. However, before the soul-warming lotus could do anything, even more images emerged from the dark fog. Compared to the gloomy images earlier, the new ones were undoubtedly much brighter. Not long after these images appeared, they soon covered the entire knowledge sea. The light from these countless images penetrated the shackles of the darkness. After that, these images shattered and dissolved into the darkness. Following the integration of these bright images, the black fog quickly became thinner. In just a moment, it abruptly disappeared just like how it appeared all of a sudden earlier. Compared to the setbacks in Xueqi's life, he had gone through far more happy experiences. When he was a young child, his parents would always take care of him. When he ventured into the outside world, he made many friends, and they gave him warmth. Moreover, his wives were still waiting for his return. No one was perfect, everyone carried darkness in their heart, but there was also light. If they couldn't look straight at the darkness, how were they supposed to embrace the bright side? Only irresolute people would be devoured by their dark side. Xueqi's gaze was clear as he stood in front of the profound source gate and circulated his power, infusing it into the gate to refine it. At the same time, he was secretly shocked. Mu had divided Mo's source into 3,000 pieces and sealed them in 3,000 different universe worlds. In other words, the one before his eyes was only one of the 3,000 pieces. Moreover, it had been suppressed and sealed behind the profound source gate, so the energy it could release was insignificant. Nevertheless, this weak energy was enough to stimulate the dark side in his heart. Given his heritage as a Ninth Order Master, Xueqi could quickly shake off such influence. However, the strongest cultivators in this world were only in the immortal ascension boundary. Once they were affected, none of them could regain their senses. Mu was right to say that unless she could take charge of the profound source gate, the birth of the Black Ink cult was inevitable. Nonetheless, Little 11th was by her side, so she couldn't go near the profound source gate. Otherwise, even the faint bit of source strength leaking out would have a huge impact on Little 11th. It would very likely integrate into his body, possibly even awakening him. Xueqi slowly activated his power and patterns started lighting up around his palm and spread across the entire gate. It seemed that it wasn't difficult to refine this treasure. As he looked at the gate's transformation, Xueqi realized that when all the patterns and symbols on the gate lit up, he would successfully refine it. The source behind the gate seemed to have detected something as it became violent all of a sudden. It started activating its power from the mysterious space behind the gate and kept crashing against it. Booming sounds were continuously heard. At the same time, a mysterious power started spreading through the gap in the gate. As expected, Mo had indeed left behind a hidden hand. Xueqi was glad that he accepted Mu's advice and waited until the light spirit religion destroyed the Black Ink cult before he took action. Otherwise, an accident might have occurred. After a month of war, the Black Ink cult had been destroyed, but there were still some survivors. When some Black Ink cult masters realized that defeat was inevitable, they hurriedly hid somewhere to keep themselves safe. However, the moment the source strength behind the gate activated, the Black Ink cult masters, who had been hiding in different parts of the primordial world, seemed to have received some irresistible calling as they stepped out of their hiding places and dashed towards the Black Ink abyss as quickly as they could, Black Ink strength billowing from their figures. While on their way, the Black Ink strength around them thickened and allowed them to break through their limits, thus reaching higher realms. Nevertheless, there was a huge price to pay for such an unusual increase in power. Many Black Ink cult masters exploded while on their way, while those who survived saw their figures going through an irreversible transformation. In the meantime, the light spirit religion's soldiers broke into a commotion as well. When the disturbance was heard, the spirit religion's leaders were still confronting Xueqi beside the Black Ink abyss. "What happened?" asked an Order Lord in shock. Li Feiyu immediately went over to have a look. As the Fire Order Lord, she was responsible for collecting information. Soon, she figured out what was going on. She returned and explained, "Some of the spirit religion members, who have been affected by Black Ink strength, have gone mad for some reason. Black Ink strength has changed their nature, and they're now determined to enter the Black Ink abyss." It was a well-known fact that the Black Ink cult had planted some moles in the spirit religion. This was inevitable. After all, Black Ink strength was too strange, so it was difficult for anyone to put up their guard against it at all times. Moreover, in the past month, many spirit religion members had been contaminated by Black Ink strength. Since the weak Black Ink strength didn't have any noticeable impact, those from the spirit religion decided to put the matter aside for now. They would only examine every member after the dust settled. Much to their surprise, those disciples who had been affected by Black Ink strength were now transforming into entirely different people now. The cultivators, who were engulfed in Black Ink strength, madly charged towards the Black Ink abyss, causing a great upheaval. Li Fei Yu could not help but turn to look at the black ink abyss. Just now, Xueqi said that a certain someone was inside the black ink abyss, which was where the black ink cult originated from. Could the turn of events have something to do with that person? Had he done something at the bottom of the black ink abyss that caused all this disturbance? As Li Fei Yu looked in the abyss direction, she was startled for a moment before she asked, "Where's Xueqi?" Xueqi, who stood in front of the black ink abyss earlier, was nowhere to be seen. With a solemn expression, the saintess replied, "Her 4 blood slaves have been badly affected by the black ink strength as well, so they plunged into the black ink abyss." Xueqi chased after them. Hearing that, Li Fei Yu was astounded. Yu Daoqi said grimly, "It seems that all those who have been affected by black ink strength, regardless of whether their temperaments have been changed before, are doomed this time." Xueqi and her blood slaves were from the black ink cult, so they naturally had come into contact with black ink strength before. They had also cultivated in the black ink abyss in the past. The turn of events affected all those who had been corrupted by black ink strength. Therefore, Xueqi and her blood slaves were not spared. Si Kongnan turned to look at the black ink abyss and said meditatively, "Something must have happened at the bottom." Then, he shifted his attention to the saintess. "Holy saintess, you just said someone is in the black ink abyss. Who is that person?" That was something the spirit religion masters were curious about. The bottom of the black ink abyss had always been a restricted area. Even those from the black ink cult had no idea what the bottom looked like, which went to show it was a dangerous place. Could anyone actually reach the bottom while maintaining their original nature? If they could find out who the person down there was, they would probably have an idea of what happened. "Stop asking any further," ordered Lord Si Kong. "I can't explain it to you at this point." The saintess shook her head. Yu Daoqi couldn't help but bellow, "Why are you still hiding it from us now, holy saintess? Given the current situation, regardless of who the person is, he can't possibly save himself." The saintess still shook her head and remained silent. Although she wasn't familiar with Yang Kai, she trusted the first-generation saintess unconditionally. Even if the turn of events was caused by Yang Kai, he must be able to survive. Just as Yu Daoqi was about to say something, his expression changed all of a sudden as he turned to look at the depths of the black ink abyss where a powerful aura was rising rapidly. The next moment, a red figure shot up and landed on the spot where she stood earlier. She was none other than Xueqi, who dove into the black ink abyss to pursue her blood slaves. Presently, she looked battered with wounds all over her body. It was apparent that she had gotten into an intense fight earlier, but her aura remained quite intimidating. After she landed on the ground, she shot Yu Daoqi a look and said impassively, "My master is more powerful than you think. If you dare spout nonsense again, I'll kill you first." In an instant, Yu Daoqi's expression turned gloomy. He was a peak immortal ascension boundary master and an order lord. Before today, even though there were countless masters in the world, no one could speak so casually about killing him. He had even exchanged moves with Yu Buzhou before, and although he was defeated, he still managed to escape with his life. However, since it was Xueqi who threatened him now, he didn't have the guts to refute her. If he offended this crazy woman, he didn't have the confidence to flee from her and survive. Xueqi had returned to this place with an even more intimidating aura than before. They were so astonished that they were oblivious to the shocking information she revealed in her words. Li Fei Yu asked in shock, "Why are you all right?" Xueqi couldn't help but roll her eyes. "What could happen to me? Everyone corrupted by black ink strength has lost their sanity. Why are you still safe?" Upon hearing that, Xueqi finally came to her senses. She looked at her hands and felt the power within her. When she realized what happened, she said with a smile, "That's why I said my master is more powerful than you think." When the sudden change occurred, her blood slaves were instantly affected as they turned around and charged towards the black ink abyss. Realizing that something was off, Xueqi hurriedly pursued them. Upon confirming that her blood slaves were going to hurt Yang Kai, she quickly decided to kill them, despite having spent years nurturing them, before she returned. Usually, even though she could kill 4 third-order Immortal Ascension Realm Masters, she would have to pay a huge price. Nevertheless, she was the one who nurtured the blood slaves, after all. She had planted a restriction in every one of them. Also, the blood slaves could no longer perform their strongest combined attack techniques after losing their sanity. As such, even though it took Xueqi some effort, she still managed to kill them all. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5963. If we are destined to meet again, we will. When Xueqi killed the blood slaves, she didn't read too much into it. It wasn't until she heard Li Fei use words that she realized something bigger was going on. Everyone who had been corrupted by black ink strength, regardless of whether their temperament had been contorted before, was doomed this time. The bottom of the black ink abyss seemed to be deathly attractive to them as they charged towards it, no matter the cost. The blood slaves were the best examples. All 4 blood slaves had been completely loyal to Xueqi, and she had even planted a restriction on each of them to ensure that. Still, they betrayed her without hesitation just now. However, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with her. She could feel that some black ink strength remained in her body, probably what she had previously refined in the black ink abyss. Nevertheless, the black ink strength seemed to have been suppressed by some different power, so it didn't have any impact on her. That power that suppressed the black ink strength was coming from her blood. It could only be the power she derived from her master's blood. While they spoke, the disturbance among the spirit religion soldiers intensified. More and more beast-like growls were heard. The cultivators, whose temperaments had been corrupted by black ink strength, lost their sanity and turned into black ink disciples. Despite his age, the young holy son showcased his resoluteness as he ordered, "Order lords, please return and form a defense line. We can't let those who have been affected by black ink strength enter the black ink abyss, no matter what." He had no idea who the person that the saintess had mentioned was, nor did he know what that person had done at the bottom of the black ink abyss. However, he knew what he was supposed to do now. Following his order, the order lords came to their senses while the saintess looked approvingly at the holy son, who appeared pleased with this acknowledgement. Yu Daoqi looked coldly at him and thought that young men could be easily fooled by beautiful women. They had no idea that power was the best thing in the world. Despite being exasperated, he dashed forward and gathered his subordinates together as per the holy son's request. The other order lords started taking action as well, and soon, a war broke out. Following a month of the war, many people from the spirit religion had been corrupted by black ink strength. They were initially comrades, but they had to kill each other now. Many people didn't have the heart to do it, but the black ink disciples held nothing back. Since they were determined to enter the black ink abyss, they would do their best to remove any obstacles in their way. Upon realizing that these black ink disciples couldn't be saved, those from the spirit religion no longer held back. Everyone fell into a frenzy, and soon, the disturbance subsided. Just as they thought the turmoil was coming to an end, masters that were engulfed in black ink strength charged towards them from all directions. They were the black ink cult masters who had been hiding in different places. After they received the calling from the source strength in the black ink abyss, they came forward and revealed themselves. An even more intense war broke out. The spirit religion soldiers didn't have the heart to hurt their comrades, but they wouldn't go easy on those from the black ink cult. Xueqi just stood silently beside the black ink abyss and listened to the sounds of the slaughter. She had to execute Yang Kai's command by killing anyone who tried to enter the black ink abyss. The upheaval lasted for several days. It wasn't until the last batch of black ink cultists were killed that peace was restored. No one cheered or felt happy this time. The spirit religion soldiers were exhausted as they lay on the ground, and as they looked at the corpses of their slain comrades, they felt sorrowful. The spirit religion masters gathered in front of the black ink abyss again. With Yu Daoqi in front of everyone, the order lords mounted pressure on Xueqi. The sudden turn of events made them realize the importance of the black ink abyss. They had to find out what was hidden at the bottom of the abyss. Only by doing so could they prevent the same thing from happening again. However, Xueqi never gave in and her murderous intent permeated the air. The atmosphere beside the black ink abyss grew more intense by the day. The stalemate lasted for a while, but just as hostilities were about to break out, Xueqi appeared joyful all of a sudden and looked down at the black ink abyss. At the same time, all of them could feel an aura rising rapidly from the depths of the black ink abyss. What surprised them was that the power of the aura even surpassed that of Xueqi. The next moment, a figure landed in front of Xueqi, who went over and greeted the man. "Master!" Yang Kai nodded and gave her an approving look, but he raised his hand to stop her from approaching him. Presently, the space around him had been contorted as a repulsive force surrounded him. There seemed to be a mysterious power that was trying to destroy him. "It's you?" All the order lords were flabbergasted. All of them had seen Yang Kai before. When he entered the city, all the citizens went over to welcome him. He had the people's support and the blessing of the world's will. At that time, they regarded him as a fake holy son. Back then in the ancient grounds, he couldn't pass the test left behind by the first-generation saintess and had been corrupted by black ink strength. As such, 3 Order Lords joined forces and killed him, after which Li Fei Yu dealt with his corpse. No one had expected that not only was this guy alive, but he had also dived into the depths of the black ink abyss. As the Order Lords recalled what the Saintess and Xueqi had said, they couldn't help but take a look at the Saintess. They seemed to have realized something. If anyone else had emerged from the depths of the abyss at this point, these spirit religion masters wouldn't have let him off. After all, they had no idea whether this guy had been affected by black ink strength. However, at that moment, Yang Kai's aura was so terrifying that no one had the guts to say anything. "What's happening, master?" Xueqi's face paled. As she looked at the contorted space around Yang Kai and felt its destructive aura, she realized something was off. Yang Kai flashed a smile at her. "Every world has its limits. The limit of this world is the immortal ascension boundary. If anyone's power exceeds this limit, they will be repelled by this world itself." Xueqi was surprised as she realized what the man meant. "Master, do you mean you've reached the realm above the immortal ascension boundary?" Yang Kai replied with a smile. "There is no end to the martial Tao. To true masters, the realm above the immortal ascension boundary is just the starting point." Then, he turned to look at the Saintess. "I've settled all the problems at the bottom of the black ink abyss. However, some black ink strength remains. It would be best if you arranged some arrays here to prevent anyone from coveting that black ink strength." The Saintess nodded. "Don't worry, sir. I will handle everything." Following that, Yang Kai looked in Dawn City's direction and put on a smile. "I have to leave." A flustered Xueqi asked, "Where are you going, master? Please bring me with you." Yang Kai's words had a significant impact on her. She was originally from the Black Ink cult, and only sided with Yang Kai after the latter subdued her. Now that the entire Black Ink cult had been destroyed though, and all the Black Ink cult masters who had been hiding in different parts of the world had come out and been killed, it could be said that she was the only one in the world who still had some of the Black Ink cult's traces. The Black Ink cult had become history in this independent world, and there wouldn't be any remnants of their presence just a few hundred years later. Therefore, she didn't want to stay here on her own. As long as she could follow Yang Kai, she was willing to serve him. Yang Kai shook his head. "I have a mission to complete, so I can't bring you with me." Xueqi's expression instantly dimmed as she pouted and fell silent. She looked like a young girl who had just been abandoned. Yang Kai smiled helplessly. "All right. I'll give you a task." Xueqi immediately appeared elated. "Anything, master." With a solemn expression, Yang Kai said, "Stand guard here and kill anyone who tries to enter the Black Ink abyss." Xueqi replied seriously, "Yes, master." The next moment, she put on a cheeky smile. "Since I've taken on this task, do I get a reward?" Yang Kai shot her a glare before flicking his fingers, after which a drop of golden blood shot towards her. Xueqi's eyes brightened in an instant as she quickly gulped it down. She could tell that this blood droplet was very different from the ones given by Yang Kai in the past. It was a drop of his blood essence. Yang Kai then spoke to her in secret. "I've left behind a restriction, so you'd better not be impatient when you refine it. Otherwise, you'll explode." Hearing that, Xueqi nodded repeatedly. The repulsion of the world's will was increasingly conspicuous, and the destructive storm around Yang Kai made everyone's face turn pale. All the masters at the scene didn't have the confidence to survive in such a storm, but Yang Kai remained calm and collected, which showed how formidable he was. Realizing something, Xueqi hurriedly asked, "Will I see you again, master?" Yang Kai looked at her and replied, "If we are destined to meet again, we will." The next moment, a clap of thunder was heard and Yang Kai turned into a ray of light that shot into the sky. The masters watched as a crack appeared in the sky. The ray of light shot into the crack and disappeared. The destructive aura also disappeared at the same time, as though it had never been there. As the crack closed, the area beside the Black Ink abyss fell silent. All of them were covered in cold sweat, and as they recalled Yang Kai's words, they were astonished. It was the young holy son who broke the silence by asking, "So, was he the savior described in the prophecy?" Although he was young and inexperienced, he wasn't a fool. When he saw Yang Kai earlier, he realized something. "Am I the fake holy son?" He pointed at his nose. The Order Lords exchanged glances, realizing the problem as well. The saintess looked at the holy sun and replied with a smile. He's indeed the savior described in the prophecy, but you're the spirit religion's holy son. After a month of the war, the holy sun had gained the recognition of the spirit religion members. Everyone who had taken part in the crusade would only acknowledge him to be the holy sun. The young holy son scratched his head. All right, I'll be the holy son then. However, it's inappropriate that no one is aware of who the real savior is. The saintess suggested, you can slowly spread his contributions in the future so that the members will understand that he had made a move in secret and saved this world. The holy son nodded. That'll work. However, we'd better deal with the most pressing issue now. Before that person left, he told us to suppress and seal the black ink abyss. How do you want to do it, holy son? Asked the saintess. The holy son turned to look at Xueqi. Do you want to join the spirit religion? Xueqi was still feeling the power of the blood essence when she heard that. Surprised, she asked in confirmation, do you want me to join the spirit religion? Yes. We share the same goal now, and that person told you to stand guard at the black ink abyss before he left. In that case, I think it'd be better if we could work together. What do you say? Xueqi looked seriously at him and saw her alluring figure reflected in the holy sun's clear gaze. After a moment she smiled and nodded. Fine. Rather than being all on her own, she felt that this outcome wasn't too bad. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5964, The Second World. Mu's house was located on the periphery of Dawn City. When the world started repelling Yongkai and the worlds will formed a destructive storm, Mu detected something and looked in the black ink abyss direction. Has he succeeded? It was quicker than she had expected. It seemed that her several million years of waiting were worth it, for Yongkai might be able to achieve the goal she had left behind. Presently, little 11th was asleep on her lap. As though having a nightmare. He had been trembling for a while as a myriad of expressions came over him. Sometimes, he was full of murderous intent, and sometimes, he appeared furious. His figure was already soaked in sweat. Just then, a clap of thunder sounded. Little 11th awakened in shock and looked dazedly at Mu. Then, he pouted and started crying. Did you have a nightmare? Mu asked softly. Little 11th nodded repeatedly. In the dream, I saw you abandoning me, and you were getting further away from me. Mu placated him with a smile. It's just a dream. Little 11th sniffled and snuggled up to Mu. He held the woman's thighs tightly and said childishly, You mustn't abandon me, sixth sister. I'll have no one I can call family anymore. Mu patted his back. Don't worry. I'll never abandon you, and I'll always keep you company. Of course, when you become an adult one day, perhaps you'll find me annoying and run away. That will never happen. Little 11th frowned as he realized something was off. He then said, I think I've fallen ill, sixth sister. I'm feeling unwell. You'll feel better after some sleep. Little 11th replied and found a comfortable position before dozing off. As Yongkai traversed the void, he could feel a drawing force pointing out the direction for him. The drawing force wasn't the repulsive force from the primordial world. Instead, it was a force that came from the space-time river itself. He instantly realized that it was something left behind by Mu. After he refined the profound source gate in the primordial world and sealed one piece of Mu's source, he had to leave for the next world. He was in a hurry. Undoubtedly, Mu's space-time river was powerful, and the flow of time in these universe worlds was different from that of the outside world. However, the longer he stayed here, the more likely an accident would happen outside. It seems I have to hurry up. Then, he emptied his mind and soon found a closed door in his knowledge sea. It was the profound source gate that he had refined at the bottom of the black ink abyss. He didn't expect the gate to enter his knowledge sea after he refined it. However, after giving it some thought, he realized it wasn't surprising that he could keep it in his knowledge sea. The profound source gate was a treasure born alongside the heavens and earth, after all. It would be awkward if he had to carry the gate and move around. He already had the soul-warming lotus in his knowledge sea, and now there was the profound source gate. The sight was somewhat awkward. On the seven-colored island, Fong Tianci and Thunder Shadow exchanged glances with helpless expressions. This couldn't be helped. The moment the profound source gate abruptly appeared in the knowledge sea, Yen Peng became agitated. As his entire figure was engulfed in a cold aura, he soon went mad. The eerie gate seemed able to elicit the darkness in human nature. Yen Peng originally came from the black ink cult, so he couldn't be considered a good and kind person. Since he had done so many terrible things in life, it was only natural that he had a vast dark side in his heart. After his body was destroyed by Yang Kai, his soul avatar was trapped in the latter's knowledge sea. He had been cooperative and provided a lot of useful information, and Yang Kai didn't intend to kill him anyway, so letting him stay in the knowledge sea was just a minor matter. Nevertheless, after his dark side was amplified by the profound source gate, he lost his sanity. Left with no choice, Feng Tianxi and Thundershadow could only destroy his soul avatar. Certainly, they weren't feeling good about the whole affair. They finally had a new neighbor to talk to, but they hadn't lived long. That was why they felt helpless. At that moment, Feng Tianxi and Thundershadow stood on the seven-colored island in silence and refrained from looking at the profound source gate. After they took a look at the gate earlier, they realized some horrible memories from the past sprang back into their minds, but the effect could be negated by ignoring the gate. Meanwhile, once Yang Kai left the primordial world, he glanced back and realized it was nowhere to be seen. He only saw some grains of sand that moved with the flow of the river. This reminded him of what he saw in the depths of the infinite river inside the universe furnace back then. There were similar grains of sand at the bottom of the infinite river as well. However, that wasn't sand. Each grain was a universe world. After the grains of sand were spurted from the universe furnace, they would reveal their true form. Every grain of sand was equivalent to a universe world. That was the wonder of chaos evolving into the 10,000 Grand Daras. The drawing force intensified as Yang Kai traversed the space-time river and soon approached another grain of sand. That was the second world he had to enter. Without hesitation, Yang Kai adjusted his direction and plunged straight into the world. Soon, the aura of a universe world came right at his face. Just like what happened when he entered the primordial world previously, he abruptly appeared in a universe world, after which his figure plummeted. Since he had some experience now, he immediately examined his cultivation. He was relieved that even though his cultivation had been suppressed greatly, he was still in the immortal ascension boundary. Hurriedly, he circulated his power and stabilized himself mid-air. As he looked around, he realized it was a barren land with no one around. Moreover, he found the world strange as it was filled with a primitive aura. He felt as if he had barged into the river of time and returned to an ancient era. Wu Kuang, can you detect Mu's whereabouts? Yang Kai asked. Previously in the primordial world, it was thanks to Wu Kuang that they managed to find Mu. Although he was only a thread of consciousness, Wu Kuang was still connected to his true body. Furthermore, he was in charge of the primordial heaven source grand restriction where the space-time river was hidden. Therefore, if Mu wanted to give them any directives, she had to do it through Wu Kuang. However, the moment Yang Kai finished his words, he arched his brow, for he had already detected something. He turned to look in a particular direction and put on a helpless smile. I guess I've been overly worried. Since Mu wanted Yang Kai to move around different universe worlds to suppress and seal Mo's source pieces, she was naturally well prepared. In the primordial world, Mu must have left a mark on him. Therefore, the moment he arrived in this world, he immediately detected something in a particular direction. It must be over there. He then charged towards that place. In the meantime, a figure was seated with her legs crossed in the wilderness. She had been waiting there for countless years, and she had no idea how much longer she would have to wait. She wasn't even certain if all the waiting would matter. All the same, even though innumerable years had passed, she had never forgotten about her goal. She was located in a mountain valley that was surrounded by 8 mountains. All these mountains were magnificent and connected. In the mountain valley, there was an abstruse grand array. In the middle of the grand array, there was a dark rock that exuded an evil aura. The grand array, and even the mountains themselves seemed to be suppressing the dark rock. With the help of the mountain range and the grand array, this place was where the entire universe world's power was gathered. Unlike Mu in Dawn City, this woman was undoubtedly more haggard, as though she hadn't gotten any rest for a very long time. The moment Yang Kai barged into this independent world, she opened her eyes and lifted her sword from her lap. The weapon then turned into a ray of light and shot off into the distance. Following that, a beastly growl was heard from behind her. A huge ancient beast collapsed to the ground, and its blood dyed the ground red. The mountain valley was covered with huge skeletons, and every one of them belonged to an ancient beast. After so many years, she had lost count of how many ancient beasts she had killed.
The sword returned and quietly landed in front of her without a drop of blood on it. Then, she slowly turned to look in a different direction.
Her figure was stiff, as though she hadn't moved like this for a long time. This simple movement represented several 100,000 years of waiting. She put on a smile, for she could feel that all the waiting was finally worth it.
In the distance, a figure was rushing towards her.
The figure had a bit of her aura on him. It was thanks to the resonance between the shadows which allowed the newcomer to identify the direction he should head towards.
He landed on the ground and exchanged glances with the woman.
As Xueqi looked at how haggard the shadow appeared, he couldn't help feeling heartbroken. Feeling a lump in his throat, he was unable to speak for a moment. A while later, he saluted the woman and said, "Junior Xueqi greets Senior." Mu replied with a smile, "No need for formalities. You must have met me before." In response, Xueqi nodded.
Mu went on to say, "Then you should know why you're here."
While Xueqi looked at the dark rock, Mu continued, "There are no humans in this world, only some ancient beasts that roam around. As such, you don't have to deal with any schemes or plots. Just move the dark rock away and use the profound source gate to suppress it." In the primordial world, it took Xueqi a lot of effort to refine the profound source gate and suppress Mo's source piece. So much to his surprise, his task in this independent world was rather simple. As though seeing through his thoughts, Mu explained with a smile, "Every universe world is different. Perhaps you'll come across similar situations again, but there will also be times when you have to work hard to achieve your goals. Go ahead, I've been waiting for far too long."
"Yes,"
Xueqi replied respectfully. He knew that the task was simple because of Mu's efforts. He walked up to the dark rock and pushed it away.
There was a dark pit on the ground, and the howls of wind could be heard coming from it. Following that, a cold aura was approaching rapidly, as though it was coming from the depths beneath the ground. Xueqi raised his hands before pressing them down at the pit and shouting, "Open!"
A mysterious gate appeared above the pit, and with an injection of Xueqi's strength, a portal opened up. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5965. See you soon. A horrifying power was felt surging inside the pit. The howls of wind were like its growls as it kept crashing into the profound source gate. The source piece, which had been suppressed and sealed here for a long time, must have realized that something was off, so it was trying to resist. Nevertheless, its efforts were futile. If it was the complete source, the gate wouldn't have been a threat to it, but it was only a small piece. The profound source gate's suppressive power spread. At the same time, a powerful drawing force was felt coming from behind the gate. After the source piece was lured out, it lost the power to resist and disappeared into the gap. The gate closed once again, after which Xueqi kept it inside his knowledge sea. This time, it didn't take him much effort to suppress and seal Mo's source piece, but he knew it was all thanks to Mu. Just by looking at the skeletons in the valley, he knew that the woman must have waited here for countless years and killed all the ancient beasts that coveted black ink strength. If not for Mu's efforts, Xueqi would have been attacked by ancient beasts corrupted by black ink strength the moment he arrived in this world, making his situation quite perilous. As Mu watched the source getting sealed, she finally appeared relieved. She got to her feet slowly. As Xueqi looked at her in puzzlement, she extended her hand and pressed it against the man's chest. After their eyes met, Mu said, "I've completed my task, so I'll leave the rest to you, Junior. The human race's future hinges on you, so you must do your best to not fail this mission." As she spoke, her figure faded rapidly. It was as though she was about to disappear from this world. As that happened, Xueqi could feel a warm stream entering his body through the woman's palm. "Senior." With a conflicted expression, Xueqi had no idea what to say. "This is the price I have to pay for sending you away," Mu replied with a smile. Gradually, her figure was gone. As her power engulfed Xueqi, he shot into the sky and turned into a ray of light. A crack appeared in the sky just then. The ray of light passed through it and disappeared. The familiar drawing force appeared again and led Xueqi to the next world. He pressed his hand against his chest as his emotions undulated in his heart. Unlike the primordial world, the second world was one where only ancient beasts existed. He didn't do much as he only summoned the profound source gate and sealed Mo's source piece. Mu had cleared all the danger and obstacles for him. It was the result of countless years of perseverance. The entire time, Yang Kai had only briefly talked to Mu.
There was no doubt she was a kind-hearted person. She devised this plan millions of years ago and let her shadows stay in different universe worlds to carry it out. She had been on her own all this time, waiting for a future that might not even come. In the end, she didn't even make any demands or requests. She simply told Yang Kai to do his best and try not to fail. Even so, he didn't give her a definitive reply. He couldn't help but blame himself. Mu had been doing all this selflessly, and she didn't need anyone to thank her. Nevertheless, Yang Kai could give her hope. While he was lost in his thoughts, the aura of the third world came right at his face. As usual, he followed the faint guidance and successfully found Mu, who had been waiting in a desolate place for countless years. Before Mu could say anything, Yang Kai muttered, "Senior, all the darkness will be dispelled by the light one day.
The human race will have a bright future. All your contributions and efforts over the eons will be worth it."
Mu stared fixedly at him with her mouth slightly open.
With a confident expression, Yang Kai flashed a smile at her. Mu put on a smile as well.
In just a short time she understood everything and nodded. "Good."
She turned around and pointed in a particular direction. "Mo's source piece is over there. Go ahead."
"Yes." Yang Kai cupped his fist and strode towards the place.
He soon sealed the source piece and returned. Mu walked up to him and pressed her hand against his chest before her figure faded.
Yang Kai kept all the sorrow to himself and put on a bright smile. "I'll see you soon, Senior." At the last moment Mu flashed a smile at him. "See you soon."
The next instant, Yang Kai shot into the sky. As he moved around different universe worlds, he made use of the profound source gate's power and sealed the pieces of Mo's source. Every time Yang Kai arrived in a new world, he would immediately say the same thing to Mu, who would give him the same response. As they met and parted ways repeatedly, it was like a never-ending cycle. In general, things went smoothly. In most of the worlds, Mu had cleared all the obstacles for him, so he just had to find her shadow and summon the profound source gate to seal Mo's source piece.
In truth, in the primordial world, if not for the fact that Mu had to keep little 11th by her side, she could have taken control of the profound source gate as well.
However, due to little 11th, Mu in the primordial world couldn't go near the profound source gate. After all, Mo's source piece had been suppressed behind the gate. An accident might happen if little 11th approached the gate. Mo's source gave birth to the Black Ink cult. As such, Mu had to establish the light spirit religion to oppose it. In that independent world, there wasn't much help that Mu could provide in terms of aid. Moreover, the Black Ink cult had developed rapidly. As such, it took Yang Kai quite some effort before he settled everything in the primordial world. Nevertheless, things wouldn't always go smoothly. When Yang Kai entered the 60th universe world, he realized that something was off. The entire world was filled with Black Ink strength. All the living creatures in this world had been corrupted by Black Ink strength and turned into Black Ink disciples. When Yang Kai followed the guidance and found Mu, she was covered in blood while running for her life. This couldn't be helped, as everyone in that world was hunting her down. Yang Kai had no idea how long the situation had persisted, but when he found her, she was in a terrible state. After saving Mu from the Black Ink disciples, Yang Kai found a quiet place and stopped in his tracks. He asked, "What's going on, Senior?" Mu explained, "Something went wrong with the sealing location. Too much of Mo's source strength leaked out and it has affected far too many beings. They shattered the seal and let Mo's source piece break free." Upon hearing her explanation, Yang Kai finally realized why this world was filled with Black Ink strength. Mo's source piece had broken free from its shackles. The darkness in the humans of this world could no longer be hidden in front of Black Ink strength. Everyone in this world had been affected and turned into Black Ink disciples. "Do you know where the source piece is, Senior?" Yang Kai asked. Realizing his intention, Mu shook her head. "There's no point looking for it. Since you've started sealing Mo's source piece, speed is essential. Give up on this world and head to the next one." Saying so, she tried to get to her feet, but due to her injuries, she was unable to do so. Yang Kai hurriedly squatted in front of her. Mu pressed her hand against his chest. They could hear the sounds of footsteps as many living creatures were rapidly approaching them. Remember, if there's a similar situation in any world, abandon it at once. There's no point trying to achieve your goal every time because you won't be able to seal all the pieces of its source regardless. Yang Kai nodded in response. Back in the primordial world, Mu's first shadow told him that she had divided Mo's source into 3,000 pieces. Every time Xueqi sealed a piece of its source, Mo would be alerted. When it reached a certain point, Mo would awaken and retrieve all the remaining source pieces. Therefore, Xueqi couldn't seal all 3,000 pieces.
In that case, it would be wiser to give up on this world and head to the next one where it would be easier to seal the source piece.
I understand. Xueqi nodded. Also, my shadows might not be alive in all the universe worlds. You might enter a world where I'm not around, but you don't have to worry. The previous shadows had left behind enough power for you, so you can leave for the next world anytime you want. Xueqi nodded again. The footsteps were getting closer as they felt flaring energy fluctuations. The black ink disciples around them were running out of patience as they were ready to make a move. Mu's figure vanished into thin air, after which Xueqi shot into the sky, leaving the black ink disciples growling on the ground. He set off on his journey and traversed the space-time river again. He repeatedly entered different worlds and sealed the pieces of the source. 100, 200, 300. Xueqi kept count in his mind. As the number of the pieces he sealed increased, he could feel the situation worsening. Every time he sealed a piece of Mo's source, Mo would be disturbed. When it finally realized the severity of the matter, it would awaken. Xueqi had no idea what the limit was, but he knew he was getting closer to it. What made him feel helpless was that there were now more and more worlds with difficult situations. The first time he came across a problem was when he reached the 60th world. The second time was after he sealed the 100th piece, and the third time was around the 130th piece. The intervals were getting shorter. The universe worlds within Mu's space-time river all had different world principles. Therefore, the strengths of the living creatures in these worlds varied greatly. However, her guidance seemed to be leading Xueqi from the weakest to the strongest ones.
Initially, the limit of the martial Tao in the universe worlds was only the immortal ascension boundary, but gradually, it became the transcendent realm, then the saint realm, the saint king realm, the Tao source realm, and eventually the emperor realm. As the living creatures in those worlds became stronger, it became more difficult for Xueqi to achieve his goal. After all, Mu's shadow was on her own in most worlds. The powerful creatures were naturally attracted to Mo's source strength, and once too many of them gathered together, even Mu's shadow couldn't stop them. Xueqi followed Mu's advice. Every time he came across a fallen world, he would give up on it at once. Nevertheless, he would always look for Mu and integrate her last bit of power into his body. He wasn't after Mu's power. He just wanted to bring as much of her away as possible. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5966. Rescuing the Suppressing Black Ink Army. As Xueqi was swimming through Mu's space-time river, a great battle had erupted outside the primordial heaven's source Grand Restriction. After dealing with the Black Ink Clan reinforcement army, Xueqi rushed ahead to investigate the situation at the primordial heaven's source Grand Restriction, while the Crusade force was a step behind since they had to clean up the aftermath as well as rest and recover. But it was only a few days before the Crusade force set off as well. Through the space arrays set up by the Void Guard, the army was able to rapidly advance and soon reach the edge of the spiritless land. This was where the last universe temple was located. Something unexpected had happened at the primordial heaven's source Grand Restriction a few years back. The suppressing Black Ink army was swallowed up into the Grand Restriction, and a large number of Black Ink clansmen poured out from the opening. The Void Guard could not set up a space array directly outside the Grand Restriction as it would simply be courting death. At the edge of the spiritless land, the army regrouped, and a few days later, it set sail towards the primordial heaven's source Grand Restriction. After a month, the army arrived at the outer perimeter of the Grand Restriction, where a large battle immediately broke out. This was a war launched with all the forces the human race possessed, with millions of human soldiers fighting while being led over by 39th Order Masters. Originally, there were far fewer 9th Order Masters on the human race side. Including Xueqi, there were 10 of them before the attack on the No-Return Pass. However, the successful battle at the No-Return Pass provided a breakthrough opportunity for many rising stars, many of whom succeeded in advancing. 23 people attempted to break through, and the outcome was that 3 failed while 20 succeeded. As a result, the 9th Order Masters reached the 30 mark. Afterwards, more Masters broke through to the 9th Order as well. Now, there were more than 39th Order Masters in the Crusade force. Thousands of years ago, through a series of devastating losses, culminating in the Barren Territory War,
the veteran Ninth Order Masters were decimated until only Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing remained. After several thousand bitter years passed though, the human race had finally restored some of its foundation. More than 30 Ninth Order Masters, millions of soldiers, and powerful warships filled the battlefield. The power of the entire human race had gathered here today. However, the Black Ink clan was not to be underestimated either. The primordial heaven's source grand restriction had been around for millions of years. During these years, Black Ink's strength increased constantly, but it had reached a limit. Even if it kept increasing, it would be difficult to break through the grand restriction. Thus, much of the Black Ink strength accumulated had been used to create more Black Ink clansmen. One could say that within the primordial heaven's source grand restriction, the Black Ink clan's forces had already accumulated to a terrifying number. If Mu had not brought out her hidden hand to put Mo to sleep back then, the primordial heaven's source grand restriction would most likely have been destroyed and the Black Ink clan could have swept over the entire universe. It was Mu who gave the human race a final chance, allowing them to create the current situation. Currently, the primordial heaven's source grand restriction was still under Wu Kuang's control. Even though the opening in the grand restriction had expanded significantly, it still had a limit, which restricted the speed of the Black Ink clansmen's escape. Furthermore, royal lords still found it incredibly difficult to pass through. If they forced their way out, it would severely damage their foundation, which had been proven by past attempts. When the Crusade force arrived at the Grand Restriction, a large army of Black Ink clansmen had already gathered outside, numbering over 100 million. Though there were no royal lords among them, there were still plenty of pseudo-royal lords. Compared with the immense Black Ink clan army, the human race army appeared minuscule. When the war broke out, the human race's forces were far inferior in number to the Black Ink clan. However, relying on the experienced army which had survived through countless battles, they coordinated with each other and made use of all their advantages to fight. Even if they could not gain the upper hand, they still wouldn't appear weak in front of their enemies. From afar, the human race army looked like a small snake slithering agilely around a giant python, constantly tearing at the latter's body. The entire void was filled with the corpses of the Black Ink clansmen, and Black Ink strength released from them had condensed together to form massive Black Ink clouds. Each Ninth Order Master was going all out to slaughter the pseudo-royal lords. Even the Eighth Order Masters were unwilling to appear weak. Together, they got into battle formations and charged fearlessly at their enemies. At the Grand Restriction's opening, the Black Ink clansmen kept pouring out to reinforce their army. However, what shocked them all was how the speed of their reinforcements couldn't keep up with the speed of the slaughter. The number of Black Ink clansmen gathered outside the primordial heaven's source Grand Restriction was still steadily decreasing. The morale of the human race army grew higher and higher. However, Mi Jingluan, who was standing by at the command center of the human race army, did not show any joy on his face. He knew that this was only the beginning of the war. So far, he had not seen any royal lords make a move yet, and through his communication with Wu Kuang, he also knew of Yang Kai's whereabouts and why the royal lords were unable to leave the Grand Restriction. Currently, he was facing a dilemma. Even though the suppressing Black Ink army was trapped in the Grand Restriction, and they were safe for the time being with Wu Kuang's help, countless royal lords were searching for the suppressing Black Ink army's whereabouts within the Grand Restriction. Once the suppressing Black Ink army's tracks got exposed, their survival chances inside the Grand Restriction would become null. Wu Kuang had the ability to send the suppressing Black Ink army out of the Grand Restriction, but he had not done so before because of the gathered Black Ink clan army. Even if he were to send them out, it would be like sending a flock of lambs to a tiger's den. Instead, it was better to let the suppressing Black Ink army to continue hiding inside the Grand Restriction where he could look after them. However, now that the Crusade force had arrived, the suppressing Black Ink army had an escape route. As long as they could coordinate with the Crusade force, sending them out of the Grand Restriction shouldn't be an issue. But doing so would create another problem. The opening in the Grand Restriction had been torn numerous times already, and each time, it caused irreparable damage to the Grand Restriction. In order to send the suppressing Black Ink army out, Wu Kuang would have to widen the gap in the Grand Restriction wider. Currently, the opening in the Grand Restriction could only allow Black Ink clansmen weaker than royal lords to pass through. If a royal lord were to force their way out, it would severely damage their strength, which was why they were all still hiding within the Grand Restriction. If the opening was expanded, then the royal lords might be able to enter and leave the Grand Restriction freely. There were a large number of royal lords within the Grand Restriction, and if they joined the battlefield,
The pressure that the Crusade force would have to bear would be far more than what they were facing now, which meant that the intensity of the battle would also shoot straight up.
This was the dilemma that Mi Jingluan was currently facing. The suppressing Black Ink army was in danger, but the cost of saving them was allowing royal lords to join the battlefield.
However, an answer had already appeared in his heart.
It was imperative that they save the suppressing Black Ink army. Without even mentioning that the suppressing Black Ink army was composed of elites from the human race who had guarded the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction for over 2,000, there was also divine dragon Fu Guang among them. Many of Yang Kai's family members also belonged to the suppressing Black Ink army. For all these reasons, Mi Jingluan could not simply abandon them. If those who made great contributions were left to die, it would devastate the morale of the other soldiers. Of course, this was not the main reason. From another perspective, eliminating the Black Ink clan here would not directly affect the outcome of the war. No matter how many pseudo-royal lords they killed, or how many Black Ink clansmen were slaughtered, it would only weaken the Black Ink clan's strength but not shake their foundation. No one knew how many Black Ink clansmen were still hiding within the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction. Not even Wu Kuang.
The royal lords within the Grand Restriction were something that they would have to face sooner or later. While Wu Kuang still had control over the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction, it would be better to let out some royal lords and kill them, rather than allowing all of them to rush out all at once when the Grand Restriction inevitably collapsed.
Based on the current situation, tearing open another opening in the Grand Restriction and allowing the royal lords to pass through was beneficial for them as it could alleviate some of the pressure in advance. Therefore, it was both morally and tactically sound to say that saving the suppressing Black Ink army was a necessary move. What was more, the human race still had some cards up their sleeves.
They hadn't revealed all of their strength yet.
With an idea in mind, Mi Jingluan and Wu Kuang discussed with each other and soon agreed on a plan. The movement of the human race army quickly changed. Originally, the army of millions remained mobile, using superior mobility to harass the Black Ink clan army since they were outnumbered by them. If they wanted to kill more enemies, they had to preserve their strength as much as possible. But now, the human race army suddenly gathered all their mass and recklessly charged towards the opening in the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction. The human masters took up position on the outer periphery, forming a defensive shield around the troops while the slightly weaker soldiers gathered at the center, enhancing the army's strength. The Black Ink clan had not in any way expected that the humans would suddenly change their strategy. Since the Black Ink clan's deployment was not as tight as their opponents, the human race army easily rammed through their lines and breached their defenses. The human race army advanced straight through the gaps, paving multiple paths towards the Grand Restriction's opening using the blood and remains of the Black Ink clansmen. Just as the Crusade force approached the opening, the Grand Restriction suddenly expanded like the mouth of a ferocious beast and spat out the suppressing Black Ink fortress. The timing was perfect. This success had to be credited to Wu Kuang's guidance.
Without him, the suppressing Black Ink army would never be able to break out of the Grand Restriction at such an apt time.
If they had done it too early, they would have been surrounded by the Black Ink clan army. Too late, and the human race army would have suffered heavy losses. The human race army coalesced into a single force and did not pause for even a moment.
When the suppressing Black Ink army in control of the suppressing Black Ink fortress merged with the rest, they broke through the encirclement of the Black Ink clan and flew out.
It was only once they reached a suitable distance that they reorganized their formations. The first clash between the human race army and Black Ink clan army ended with a resounding victory for the humans, but everyone knew that this was just the beginning. There was no time to rest on this battlefield.
Once the fighting began, one should only seek to rest in death. Powerful auras emerged from the opening in the Grand Restriction soon after, and the vague silhouettes of many figures could be seen moving restlessly through the dark opening.
Royal lords.
The faces of all the masters of the human race became solemn since the number of figures visible was not by any means small.
During their first crusade, the Black Ink clan had deployed some 300 royal lords in total, which was 3 times the number of Ninth Order masters at the time. Though not so many royal lords were gathered at the opening at this moment, there were at least 40 of them. Moreover, this was just the beginning.
There would definitely be more royal lords who received the news and rushed out from the depths of the Grand Restriction soon.
Mi Jingluan had already tried to overestimate the Black Ink clan's heritage as much as possible, but he realized that he had still underestimated them in the end. The royal lords didn't immediately rush out of the Grand Restriction as they weren't sure if the current opening would allow them to pass through safely.
After a brief hesitation, one of the royal lords stepped forward. As soon as he took a step forward, The royal lord appeared outside the Grand Restriction and stood frozen in place for a moment, clearly surprised at how smoothly he had passed through.
Martial Peak. Chapter 5967. Giant Spirit God Attacks. Even more royal lords stepped through the opening soon after, the convergence of their heaven-shaking, earth-moving auras distorting the void around them. Each royal lord's gaze was fixed in the direction of the human race army, expressions of cruelty and bloodlust clear on their faces. On Puryong Pass, Mi Jingluan looked on coldly before tossing out an object and shouting, "Go!"
It was a round, bead-like object. Under the blessing of a Ninth Order Master strength, the small round bead quickly broke through the heavy blockade of the Black Ink clan and reached the royal lords. The gazes of the many royal lords were attracted to the round bead, but after examining it, they found that despite its peculiar appearance, it was not worth much attention. One of the royal lords threw a casual punch out at the round bead, shattering it instantly.
Suddenly, a surprise occurred that caught all the royal lords off guard.
When the round bead was shattered, countless universe fragments appeared out of nowhere, as if they were the remains of the round bead.
Strong space principle fluctuations followed suit before two massive figures that blocked the heavens and covered the earth appeared. Each royal lord's face was filled with shock. On the other hand, Ada and Aer, who were prepared beforehand, did not give the royal lords any time to react, launching a violent attack at them as soon as they appeared. Utterly terrifying giant palms slapped down, and the royal lords were swept up by the force. As blood burst forth, the sound of bones breaking rang out. The royal lords all screamed, some in pain, others in panic. None of them had expected two giant spirit gods to enter the battlefield in this manner, so they immediately took heavy losses from this sudden attack. Several royal lords were instantly pulverized into mist, their auras simply vanishing from existence, while the survivors scattered in all directions. This was the trump card of the human race. During the battle at the No-Return Pass, Ade and Aer were pinned down by the two Black Ink giant spirit gods and were unable to play a decisive role until Yang Kai teamed up with Ade to kill one of the Black Ink giant spirit gods, which greatly improved the human race's situation. But here, without Black Ink giant spirit gods to occupy them, the two giant spirit gods could perfectly demonstrate their terrifying might. The Black Ink clan did not have the means to stop such existences.
Even a casual wave of a giant spirit god's hand was enough to smash anything it made contact with.
Before the world bead they were hiding in was sent out, Ade and Aer must have received instructions from Mi Jingluan beforehand. So when they saw the fleeing royal lords, Ade immediately went to pursue them while Aer stayed behind, his massive figure acting as a barrier to block the opening in the Grand Restriction.
At the opening, the royal lords who had received the news gathered nearby but hesitated to step out, each of them looking fearfully towards the towering figure in front of them.
Though the giant spirit gods were incredibly powerful, their immense size also made them less agile. So even after chasing the fleeing royal lords for a while, Ada was unable to capture any of them. Annoyed, he turned around and charged into the Black Ink clan army's formation instead. What followed was like a tiger descending upon a flock of sheep. No matter how many Black Ink clan soldiers fought back, giving their all, even their very lives, their attacks were no different to a calm breeze to Ada. The massive army was instantly disrupted and broken apart. Ada was like a rampaging bull, trampling and crushing everything in his path. Giant gaps had now been opened in the Black Ink clan army, which was already somewhat scattered to begin with. Mi Jingluan was overjoyed when he saw this and immediately gave the order for the entire army to attack. The human race army, which had already rearranged their formations, charged the Black Ink clan, but unlike before, they only had to deal with the scattered sections that had been cut out from the main force. This greatly reduced the pressure on them. Just as the human race army was launching their second attack, 10 figures flew out from the suppressing Black Ink fortress, but they did not head to the battlefield and instead flew in the opposite direction. In the midst of a battle, actions like this would normally be enough to label them as deserters. However, everyone turned a blind eye to this and regarded it as a matter of course. This couldn't be helped as the auras of these masters were fluctuating wildly, a sign that they were about to break through. Zhao Yibai, Xueqi, and Zhao Ya's figures were included amongst the 10. While members were being selected for the suppressing Black Ink army from the various armies, Mi Jingluan adhered to the principle of being lacking rather than excessive. That was because guarding the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction was not too dangerous a task then. They had divine dragon Fu Guang leading them and the cooperation of Wu Kuang, who had control over the Grand Restriction. All the suppressing Black Ink army had to do was intercept the Black Ink clansmen escaping from the opening. Taking the development of talent into consideration, Mi Jingluan had placed many promising candidates qualified to advance to the Ninth Order in the suppressing Black Ink army, distancing them from the brutality of the various Great Territory battlefields, so they could focus on cultivating outside the primordial heaven's source grand restriction in the hopes of advancing as soon as possible. Only, various changes occurred with the primordial heaven's source grand restriction later on, leading to the increased danger outside of the grand restriction. No matter how incredible a strategist he was, Mi Jingluan could not predict all the changes that would happen over 2,000 years. Regardless, no one could deny that the suppressing Black Ink army was a force of elite masters. From the present situation alone, 10 masters out of the few thousand the suppressing Black Ink army was made up of were about to break through their limits and reach the Ninth Order open heaven realm. Such a proportion would be impossible to reproduce in any of the conventional armies. The 10 masters were currently only in the Eighth Order open heaven realm, so even if they did put their lives on the line on this battlefield, the role they could play would not be significant. Eighth Order masters were plentiful among the human race, so 10 more or 10 fewer would make no difference. However, if they were able to break through successfully and return as Ninth Order masters, then even if only half of them succeed, the human race stood to gain 5 more Ninth Order masters. Moreover, just from the recent situation alone, one could see that the success rate of the rising stars who have been nourished by the World Tree clones was surprisingly high when it came to ascending to the Ninth Order, far surpassing the generations of the past. These 10 had actually reached their limits a long time ago, but they have been trapped in the primordial heaven's source grand restriction and had not dared to break through so as to avoid exposing their whereabouts. The human race army charged, and even with the Black Ink clan going all out to resist, it was difficult for them to blunt this assault. The human race army brought an aura of death with them as they swept across the void, extinguishing the souls of countless Black Ink clansmen. Coupled with Ada's wanton rampage, unimaginable losses had been created for the Black Ink clan in just a short period of time, and the situation was only growing worse for them. The Black Ink clan finally realized that things had taken a dire turn. 2 giant spirit gods suddenly appeared and completely disrupted their formation, especially the giant spirit god who was guarding the opening. If they did not defeat him, the Black Ink clan would not be able to receive reinforcements, and with the current strength of the human race, those outside the grand restriction would eventually be wiped out. The royal lords who left the grand restriction quickly understood this and began to take action. Fortunately for them, the humans were unable to divide their forces at this moment, and even the Ninth Order masters dared not rashly move independently. If they were trapped in the vast sea of Black Ink clansmen, no one can guarantee that they would be able to escape alive. Under this situation, as long as the royal lords did not actively provoke the human race army, they would not need to engage the Ninth Order masters. On the other hand, the only one who could act recklessly in the midst of the Black Ink clan army, Ade, was not very bright. Once his blood began pumping, he simply moved towards wherever there were more foes to deal with, so it was difficult for the human race army to coordinate with him even if they wanted to. Seeing this, the royal lords regrouped and charged brazenly towards Aer. Naturally, just 1 or 2 royal lords would not be a match for Aer. In fact, not even 10 of them would be able to deal with him. However, the number of royal lords that came out of the grand restriction was far greater than that. More than 40 royal lords charged towards Aer from all directions, and powerful secret techniques were launched one after another. Even a being as powerful as a giant spirit god staggered under such a heavy bombardment. Aer roared as he kicked and punched randomly, launching heaven-destroying, earth-shattering attacks one after another. However, most of these were dodged by the royal lords, and the few attacks that connected could not kill the royal lords with a single blow, only injuring them at most. This kind of swarming strategy was used by the Ninth Order masters to deal with the Black Ink giant spirit god in years past, but now it was being utilized by the Black Ink clan. However, Ninth Order masters were generally stronger than these inexperienced royal lords, so the humans needed just 20 or so Ninth Order masters to hold off one Black Ink giant spirit god back, whereas the Black Ink clan required a far greater number of royal lords. Startled by Aer's roar, Ada finally regained some of his senses and turned to look towards the opening in the primordial heaven source grand restriction, rushing over in the next moment. When Ada arrived at the opening, more than 10 royal lords rushed out from it. The scene of 2 giant spirit gods teaming up to fight against more than 50 royal lords was extremely intense. Even more Black Ink clansmen gathered at the opening, among which were many royal lords as well. No one knew how many royal lords were hidden within the grand restriction. Their numbers within the dark space seemed to be endless, and they never stopped coming no matter how many were cut down. Many royal lords were tangled up with the two giant spirit gods, but neither side could defeat the other. Meanwhile, the Black Ink Clan soldiers behind the opening found opportunities to flood out and join the massive battlefield. On Puryong Pass, Mi Jingluen's expression was solemn. The human race's only trump card had already been played, but apart from the initial success they gained against the Black Ink Clan, it hadn't been able to play a decisive role. Right now, Ah De and Ah Air were blocking the opening together, but all they were really doing was delaying the speed of reinforcements coming out. If this continued, the situation would become unfavorable for the human race as more time passed. No matter what strategies he could come up with, the key to winning or losing a war was still the balance of power. Compared to the Black Ink Clan, the human race army was undoubtedly an elite force, but their numbers were just too limited. Casualties were inevitable in war, and once their army reached a certain critical limit in their losses, their momentum would collapse. When that time came, the human race army's fate on this battlefield surrounded by enemies would be tragic. And this was merely a war against the Black Ink Clan army. The Black Ink Clan army were not the only ones the humans had to fight against. The main enemy they were up against was the one who stood behind them, Mo. It was an unbelievably terrifying foe. Was there any hope for victory in this war? Mi Jingluen had no idea. All he knew was that as a human, one had to give their all in battle in order to leave no regrets behind. And through the information coming in from Wu Kuang's side, what Yang Kai was doing would also be a key for them. If Yang Kai could succeed, then the situation may not be as bad as he imagined it to be. Just like the giant spirit gods Ah De and Ah Air, Yang Kai was also a trump card for the human race. In the vast and desolate void, a faint light suddenly blossomed, quickly growing into a dazzling brightness that persisted for a long time before gradually subsiding. A graceful figure stood quietly in the void. She opened her eyes, revealing a pensive expression, as if she had vaguely understood something. It's time to end this once and for all. Saying so, a pair of glistening and beautiful wings suddenly spread out on her back. With a gentle flap of her wings, she shot off, breaking through the barriers of space in an instant. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5968. Long Journey. For several months, the battlefield was a bloodbath. The human race soldiers continued to weave through the battlefield, harvesting the lives of Black Ink clansmen. Their charge was unimpeded at first, but as more and more royal lords left the Grand Restriction, the pressure on the humans grew stronger and stronger. Ada and Ah Air were still blocking the opening of the Grand Restriction, but they could not stop all of the Black Ink clansmen, and when they were surrounded and attacked by dozens of royal lords at once, there would eventually be leaks in their blockade, and every time that happened, a large number of Black Ink clansmen would swarm out of the Grand Restriction. Many of the Black Ink clansmen who were unable to escape the circle of battle were caught in it and were annihilated without even a single bone left behind. But many more escaped unharmed to support their brethren on the battlefield. The entire void was flooded with rich Black Ink strength and bodies, which may be fine for the Black Ink clan, but for the humans, such an environment was brutal. Since the soldiers were constantly consuming purifying Black Ink pills, their medicinal efficacies were falling steadily. Ordinarily, the medicinal efficacies of a single purifying Black Ink pill would last for a few days, but after a months-long high-intensity fight, the medicinal efficacies of purifying Black Ink pill were only lasting less than 6 hours each now. Despite how many purifying Black Ink pills the humans had stockpiled beforehand, there was still a limit in the end. The same went for purifying light. Once the purifying Black Ink pills and purifying light ran out, regardless of how much of an advantage the humans had at that point, it would be hard to maintain it going forward. After fighting for so long, the human race army could no longer maintain the same intensity in battle. Now, when they charged, only half of the soldiers fought while the other half took the opportunity to rest and recover. This was the only method that Mi Jingluen could employ to maintain the combat capabilities of the human race army. But this plan would not work in the long term. As the number of royal lords increased, the pressure was also increasing for the humans, and the casualties were also rising at an alarming rate. The only comforting thing was that 8 of the 10 rising stars from the suppressing Black Ink army were able to advance to the 9th Order. Including the 9th Order masters they had before, the total number of 9th Order masters now broke through the 40 mark. This was probably the final number of 9th Order masters for the human race. Before this war ended, no one else would be able to safely break through again. Among the 8 newly advanced Ninth Order Masters, Yang Kai's 3 legacy disciples were the most conspicuous. The 3 of them joined forces to perform Yang Kai's unique secret technique, the Sun and Moon Divine Wheel, killing more than 10 royal lords over the course of this battle. One should know that all 3 of them were in the Ninth Order now, so together, the might of the Sun and Moon Divine Wheel that they executed was even more powerful than even Yang Kai's. Moreover, Yang Kai's Sun and Moon Divine Will only contained space-time strength, but their version also had the power of Zhao Ya's spear principles mixed in, which made it even more domineering. Even though the trio had just broken through, this secret technique was not something that the royal lords could resist. Unfortunately, the consumption of this secret technique was too great for the 3 of them, and they could only use it once a day. However, every time they did, a royal lord had died. The royal lords naturally took note of this, and whenever the trio appeared, multiple royal lords would move to engage them in a fight to the death. The human race army kept wandering the battlefield and fighting, slaughtering countless Black Ink clansmen, but the losses they sustained were also shocking. This seemed to be a war that would not end until both sides were wiped from existence. Despite having achieved far more than they ever had in any battle in the past, Mi Jingluan on Puryong Pass did not feel happy, and that was because he could not see any hope of winning this war even now. The 2 giant spirit gods were still guarding the opening at the Grand Restriction. These 2 had restrained dozens of royal lords and even killed some occasionally, but they were conveyed in wounds and nobody knew how much longer they could persist. Once their support fell, the opening of the Grand Restriction would be left completely open and the Black Ink clan could come pouring out in far vaster numbers. Every Ninth Order Master was draining a great amount of power. Not one of the 40-plus Ninth Order Masters was without injury. Some had even sustained such great damage from the royal lords that they almost lost their lives. Eighth Order Masters were also struggling to maintain their battle formations. While the battle formations allowed the Eighth Order Masters to become more powerful, it was also a burden on them, especially for those acting as the core of the formation. The pressure they faced was much more compared to that of the other Eighth Order Masters. It was not a problem for a short period, but it was difficult for even the Eighth Order Masters to maintain a battle formation for an extended time. At the beginning of the war, the Eighth Order Masters were still able to form 7 stars and 6 paths formations, but even the 6 paths formation could no longer be seen now. The strongest battle formations they were using were now just 5 elements formations, while most of the Eighth Order Masters were only maintaining the lowest 3 fortunes formation to fight against their enemies. It was not that they did not want to form stronger battle formations, but they were truly strong in will but weak in strength. As for the soldiers under the Eighth Order, many had died when their warships were destroyed. The purifying black ink pills and purifying light were constantly being consumed, and no matter how much they had been saving up, they would see the bottom of their stock sooner or later. Even the small stone race army, which Yang Kai had distributed to the human race army beforehand, had been decimated. The geography of the battlefield was also a major hindrance for the humans. The ever-growing black ink clouds and black ink strength that filled the entire void seemed to be turning the battlefield into a black ink ocean. The Black Ink clan were like fish in water in this environment, while the humans were being heavily restricted. The divine spirits roared as they fought, but even they could not change the course of this war. As the fighting progressed until this point, not only were the humans unable to see any trace of hope, but they were gradually being submerged in despair. However, no one retreated, because they all knew that this was a war that could not be lost. If this war was lost, then the human race was likely to be wiped from existence. Everyone was holding on, waiting for a chance to turn things around. That glimmer of hope was now inside the primordial heaven's source Grand Restriction. Naturally, it was the person who could create all kinds of miracles, and the one who has led the humans on the path of survival for the past few thousand years. It could be said that the current heritage and capital that the human race possessed that allowed them to carry out a second crusade had to be credited to him. Nevertheless, he had not appeared yet. So, there was still hope for the human race. The 700th world was a scene of doom. Black ink strength had already spread throughout the entire world. Yang Kai followed the faint trace and found the hiding Mu. After Mu infused all her remaining power into his body, she disappeared without a trace. In the 800th world, Yang Kai did not sense Mu's presence at all. Without hesitation, he activated the power that Mu's other shadows had left in his body and left this universe world. In the 900th world, peace reigned and everyone lived in harmony. Yang Kai successfully reunited with Mu and with the help of the profound source gate, suppressed and sealed Mo's source piece before leaving quickly. The 1000th world. 100th. 200th. The cycle continued in a seemingly endless journey which Yang Kai was treading alone. Sometimes, Yang Kai needed only to follow the faint sensation to find Mu and then use the profound source gate to suppress and seal Mo's source piece. However, there were often times when things didn't go as smoothly as he hoped. There were universe worlds where black ink strength had spread everywhere, and even Mo's source piece had escaped. In these universe worlds, there was not much that Mu could do. She hid and waited for Yang Kai to arrive so that she could infuse the power of her shadow into his body. To make matters worse, there were some universe worlds where Mu had already been killed. Even though she was the most powerful of the martial ancestors, her shadows were only a state from a certain period of her life, and within those periods, her strength was limited. For example, in the 800th world, black ink strength dominated everything and Mu's shadow was missing. There was no reason for Yang Kai to even stay in such a world. There were also some worlds where black ink strength and Mu's powers competed against each other, similar to the situation in the primordial world. If Yang Kai had enough time, he wouldn't mind lending a hand to Mu, cutting off the wings of Mo and suppressing and sealing pieces of its source. However, through the messages transmitted by Wu Kuang from the jade pendant that he wore on his chest, Yang Kai knew that the situation both inside and outside the primordial heaven's source grand restriction was dire. He didn't have any time to waste, so he could only give up when he encountered worlds like these. Mu's shadow in these worlds did not object to any of his decisions, always imbuing their power into his body. Passing through one world after another, Yang Kai soon lost track of how many source pieces he had suppressed and sealed. He only knew that the further he went, the greater the likelihood that an unexpected encounter would happen. Often, he would pass through many universe worlds in a row and still find it difficult to suppress and seal even one of Mo's source pieces. He knew that his journey would most likely come to an end soon. Once he had suppressed and sealed enough pieces, Mo would awaken completely, and then he would have to face the most powerful existence in the world. Yang Kai didn't dare to linger. Besides wanting to suppress and seal even more pieces, he also wanted to take away all of Mu's shadows from each universe world. This predecessor had done enough for the human race. Even though she had fallen, her life had been divided into 3,000 pieces and continued to protect the human race in the form of shadows. How lonely those shadows must have been over the years. Taking them away was also a kind of liberation for them. The power that the shadows infused into Yang Kai's body at their final moments seemed unremarkable. It couldn't even enhance Yang Kai's strength in the slightest, but this inconspicuous power was proof of Mu's existence and sacrifice. This was the greatest kindness his predecessor had given to the human race, so it was only right as a successor to show how grateful he was. There was little he could do for Mu. He could only try his best to free more of her shadows from their endless loneliness and waiting. It wasn't that he was unaware of the urgent situation the human race was facing outside the primordial heaven's source grand restriction. The information conveyed by Wu Kuang had already indicated that the humans were not in a good state currently. The prolonged intensity of this war had made it difficult for them to hold on any longer. Without external intervention, the human race would undoubtedly be defeated in this war. But Yang Kai was in no hurry to leave the space-time river despite knowing that. Because the enemies that the human race had to face were not only the Black Ink clan army, but also Mo. Nobody had any idea just how powerful the legendary creator realm was, so Yang Kai could only suppress and seal as much of its source as possible to weaken its power and increase the chances of the human race's ultimate victory. Martial Peak. Chapter 5969. It's her. The towering bodies of the giant spirit gods were covered in wounds. They roared and bellowed, driving back one royal lord after another, like two powerful lions encircled by a pack of hyenas. Despite their immense strength and overwhelming power, the huge disparity in numbers allowed their small foes to run rampant. At this moment, there were almost 100 royal lords gathered around Ade and Aer. The giant spirit gods were powerful indeed, but they still had their limits in the end. Even together, Ade and Aer could barely handle the 100 or so royal lords attacking them all at once. With the giant spirit gods fully occupied, the Black Ink clan were finally able to pour out of the grand restriction unrestrained. Powerful auras emerged from the opening one after another and joined the battlefield. All the advantages that the human race army had worked so hard to build up were melting away under the constant stream of enemy reinforcements. The war had reached a most despairing point. Yang Kai still had not shown up. The human race army had suffered huge losses in this battle. Whether it be their numbers or warships they were relying on, it was hard to keep up. The many defenses deployed on Puryong Pass had also been blasted apart. At this moment, Puryong Pass was only covered by a few layers of the simplest defensive arrays.
If they were to take a few more attacks, then it was likely that even these last barriers would be broken.
Standing up on the wall, Mi Jingluan sighed in his heart.
The limit of the human race had already been reached at this point of the battle.
If they continued to engage, the last of their forces would be buried here. Have we failed? Have we not done enough? No. That can't be. Since the Black Ink clan invaded the 3,000 worlds, thousands of years had gone by. The human race had not only recovered their homeland but also organized a strong force for a second crusade. They had crushed whatever stood in the way until they reached the primordial heaven's source grand restriction. They had done well enough.
A few thousand years was a very short time for the development of an entire race.
That the humans could recover from almost total annihilation to what they had today was a feat worth being proud of. However, their enemy was simply too strong. From primordial heaven's source grand restriction, the Black Ink clan's reinforcements kept coming, and no matter how many royal lords were killed, more would appear to take their place. Even with the two giant spirit gods to support them, it was impossible to stop this.
Wu Kuang.
Mi Jingluan called out through his surging divine sense, "How much longer will junior brother Yang take?" "Not much longer," Wu Kuang responded, "but we can't just rely on him in this war. Once he finishes his side of things, Mo will completely awaken, so he will have his own opponent. And if Mo awakens, the primordial heaven's source grand restriction will completely shatter.
Once that happens, those hidden in the grand restriction will swarm out. When that happens, you will see the scale of the Black Ink clan army is much more than what you are currently seeing now."
"Then is he a match for Mo?" Mi Jingluan asked another question. Wu Kuang answered without hesitation, "Naturally not. If he were to face off against Mo with his current strength, a death without burial is sure to await him." Mi Jingluan was silent for a moment. "So to say, what we, the human race, are up against, is an unscalable wall."
Wu Kuang responded,
"You could say that. Then there's no other way. What are you planning to do?" A bitter look appeared on Mi Jingluan's face. "Nothing. Junior brother Yang told me about his encounters in the universe furnace previously, and he also mentioned something at the edge of the universe. He anticipated the situation today before the war began, so he left a path for the human race to retreat to." Wu Kuang was surprised. "The edge of the universe?" "It's a long story," Mi Jingluan did not have the time to explain in detail. "Junior brother Yang told me that if the human race really was no match for the Black Ink clan, there was no need for us to go down fighting.
He told us to preserve our power as much as possible, and he will bring our remaining kin to another world where we can find a suitable place to live."
Wu Kuang wondered, "Such a place exists?" Mi Jingluan was honest, "I don't know, but if junior brother Yang says it does, then it definitely exists. If it does exist, it's not a bad choice. I will try to buy you some more time. If you want to retreat, then go quickly. We can't predict what will happen if things continue to drag on." "Many thanks," Mi Jingluan thanked him, knowing that Wu Kuang might put himself in danger by doing so. After all, the ones in charge of holding back the enemy while the army retreated were always in the most dangerous position. After coming to a decision, Mi Jingluan did not hesitate any longer. In this current situation, every moment of delay would further increase the casualties to the soldiers. However, to be forced from their homeland like this, to a new world in a place they did not know, it really was shameful. But reality did not give the humans much choice. As he was about to pass down the order, Mi Jingluan suddenly sensed something and turned to look into the distance. He didn't see anything at first, but in the next instant, a bright light swept over from that direction, and in the next instant, the distance grew much closer, and the light also became clearer. So fast! Mi Jingluan was astonished. Right now, he was a 9th Order Open Heaven Realm Master, and if he exerted all his strength, he could reach immense speeds, but even at his best, he would probably not be able to reach a tenth of that light's speed. Such speed was not inferior even when compared to Yang Kai's instantaneous movement. "Who is that?"
The direction the light came from was from beyond the spiritless land, where the human race army had also come from.
In other words, the one arriving was most likely a human race master. But, was there such a master among the human race? When the army set out, All masters who could participate in the battle were conscripted. Those who were left behind were either the old, the infirmed, the children, or those with insufficient cultivation. How could there be such a master hidden among them still? Just as Mi Jingluan was feeling taken aback, the other Ninth Order masters and royal lords in the battlefield also sensed the unfamiliar aura. Nobody paid attention when they first sensed it, as who would dare to be distracted when fighting a life-and-death battle? But in just a few breaths, all the masters wore astonished looks on their faces. It was because the unfamiliar aura was approaching the battlefield at a speed beyond what they could fathom, and following the approach of that aura, a powerful force that made even the Ninth Order masters and royal lords tremble pressed down on them. In just an instant, the light pierced into the battlefield. Since Mi Jingluan first detected the aura until now, less than 10 breaths had passed.
He had been staring fixedly at it, but even with his current abilities in the Ninth Order, he couldn't see the face of the person who was coming. He only vaguely saw what seemed to be wings open behind the person's back, and it was from those wings that the dazzling light was flowing out.
As this figure swept through the air, a long ribbon of light was drawn across the void. What's more, this figure disintegrated everything that stood in its way. When the light broke into the battlefield, the Black Ink clan army which was fighting with great momentum melted away in swathes like snowflakes under the scorching sun wherever the light passed. Flames of life were constantly being extinguished. Even powerful royal lords were no match for the new arrival. One royal lord wanted to intercept them, but he suddenly froze in place before he could even make a move.
When the light swept past, fresh blood suddenly spurted from the neck of the royal lord as his head flew into the air. They cut a huge swath through the middle of the Black Ink clan army, and instantly arrived at the opening in the Grand Restriction.
This was the battlefield of 2 giant spirit gods and many royal lords. The ordinary Black Ink clansmen wouldn't even dare to approach carelessly, and the human race army were also incapable of fighting side by side with the giant spirit gods here. It could be said that Ada and Aer had been in an isolated and helpless position all this while. It was only until now, when a powerful existence arrived to aid them.
Without any words, countless sword waves burst forth from the light, shooting towards various places in the void.
Black blood flew and cries of misery rang out as many royal lords' auras were extinguished. With support, Ada and Aer immediately turned from defense to offense, each one roaring and venting their pent-up rage. In a short while, the intense battle suddenly calmed down, and time and space seemed to freeze at that moment. Around 100 royal lords gathered in 2s and 3s, surrounding the 2 giant spirit gods and the master that suddenly appeared in the middle of them. Though their numbers were plentiful, each royal lord still had grave expressions on their faces. This couldn't be helped as numerous royal lords had already been killed in that short encounter just now.
Moreover, all of them died under the hands of this unwelcome guest.
What infuriated them even more was the fact that they still couldn't get a clear look at who it was that attacked them. They only knew that the strength of this human was incredible.
But the royal lords were not the only ones who did not see the face of the new arrival. Even the Ninth Order masters did not see it either, and it was mainly because this person was too fast and everything happened within a very short amount of time.
Mi Jingluan was already preparing to withdraw the army, leaving the battlefield with the remnants of their forces and waiting for Yang Kai to lead them to a new world. But before the order could be given, a new powerful helper appeared to aid them. Only the divine spirits had a vague sense of who this was, especially Fu Guang. As the most powerful one among the divine spirits and a divine dragon of the Dragon Clan, he knew some secrets that the other divine spirits did not. Feeling the aura of this person, he had some ideas. The noisy and fierce battlefield also calmed down.
The sudden silence that descended across the entire void during the midst of such a huge battle was truly unprecedented.
The dazzling light gradually faded, and under the attention of hundreds of millions of eyes, the face hidden until now was slowly revealed. It was a young woman with a beautiful face. The pair of white feathered wings behind her gave off a warm aura that seemed to dispel all the darkness of the world. Under the light of her feathered wings, the body of the person exuded inviolable power. Even Ninth Order masters would subconsciously glance away when they saw the face of that person. It's her. Mi Jingluan had an astonished look on his face. He had imagined that the person coming would be a rare expert hidden among the human race, but he never thought it would actually be her of all people. He remembered this woman. After all, he personally handled the selection for the suppressing Black Ink army back then. It could be said that he personally selected all 6,000 soldiers of the suppressing Black Ink army from each army one by one. The reason he remembered this woman in particular though was mainly because of her relationship with Yang Kai. She had also come from the star boundary and was a disciple of Langya Paradise.
If not for these relations, he would not have chosen this woman to join the suppressing Black Ink army.
Based on her potential, she should not have been qualified for it.
But what puzzled him was how this woman could actually become so powerful in the short 2,000 or so years he had not seen her.
He clearly remembered she had initially broken through to the Fifth Order. In other words, her limit in life should only be the Seventh Order.
But now, her power had not only surpassed the Seventh Order, it had reached a realm that even he, a Ninth Order master, dared not look straight at.
Just from how she was cutting down royal lords like vegetables, she seemed to be even more powerful than the giant spirit gods. Martial Peak. Chapter 5970. In My Name. Mi Jingluan was somewhat taken aback.
It was simply difficult for him to comprehend what he was seeing in front of him.
It's her. Fu Guang's expression changed slightly. Just like Mi Jingluan, he remembered this woman. She was originally a member of the suppressing Black Ink army, but since Yang Kai sent the suppressing Black Ink army to this place back then, he took her away again for some unknown reason. He may be the army commander of the suppressing Black Ink army, but he naturally would not interfere if Yang Kai wanted to take someone away. He did not even question why Yang Kai took her away in the first place. Since then, they had not seen a trace of this young woman again. Until today, when she appeared with awe-inspiring momentum. In just a short 2,000 years, she had grown from a peak Seventh Order master to something even the giant spirit gods would be wary of. So clearly some kind of transcendent events had been involved. Perhaps it was all Yang Kai's arrangement. Moreover, Fu Guang was sensing some other aura from this woman. An aura that did not belong to a human. It was such an extremely strong and pure aura that even he, a divine dragon, felt tense in its presence.
Rua Shi. On the other side of the suppressing Black Ink fortress, Gu Pan was staring at the familiar face and figure with her mind in a bundled mess.
She couldn't help but recall the scene when this junior sister of hers first entered Langya Paradise. At that time, Rua Shi was inexperienced and ignorant, and she had taken care of her in many because of their connection with Yang Kai. However, Gu Pan never expected that a day would come when this junior sister would grow to such a height that she could only look up to her. Zhang Rua Shi had always been unusual, which Gu Pan knew.
For example, she had directly advanced to the Fifth Order, but somehow, she still had room for another breakthrough after reaching the peak of the Seventh Order.
It was for this reason that Rua Shi was taken away by senior brother Yang.
Maybe senior brother Yang noticed something back then. After coming out of the chaotic dead territory, Zhang Ruashi had rushed all the way here, but when she swept her eyes around, there was no trace of the person she was hoping to see, so a hint of disappointment flickered in her eyes.
She was not worried about whether her sir was dead or not. With Sir's great strength and talent, he has ways of dealing with even the most dangerous of situations. If Sir is not here, then he has to be fighting against the Black Ink clan in some unknown place. She couldn't help but think back to the scene when Yang Kai entered the chaotic dead territory the previous time. In fact, she had left a thread of her consciousness out back then, but since she had to harmonize the powers of the burning light and serene glimmer with her own body, she had no space to pay attention to anything else. So, she did not even get to exchange words with him. Yang Kai's arrival at that time made her realize the urgency of the situation, so after he left, she risked everything to accelerate the merging process. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. After she left her retreat, she immediately rushed to the star boundary. From there, she moved to the no-return pass where she learned about the crusade plan from the Void Guard stationed at the Universe Temple. She changed directions and used the space arrays set up by the Void Guard to teleport to the outskirts of the spiritless land. Then she rushed to the battlefield from there. If not for that, it would have taken half a year to rush all the way here from the chaotic dead territory even with her current ability. Fortunately, I didn't arrive too late. Zhang Ruashi cheered inwardly to herself. Scanning the battlefield with her beautiful eyes, she observed the difficult situation the human race army was in. Lifting her broadsword up high, which was the source of the sword waves that cut down the royal lords earlier. In the quiet center of the battlefield, under the attention of hundreds of millions of pairs of eyes, Zhang Ruashi slowly brought her hands together, holding the hilt of her broadsword with its tip pointing down, before she thrust it into the void at her feet. A soft murmur came from her mouth, and though her voice was not loud, every living creature on the battlefield could hear it clearly. In my name, dispel the darkness. The wings behind her suddenly flapped open,
and the aura emanating from the woman with her head down became even more resolute and inviolable. A point of light bloomed where the sword point touched before it exploded out like a great sun, spreading in all directions at an incredible speed. It was purifying light. Since Xueqi brought the purifying light out of the chaotic dead territory, the humans had used it to reverse many declining situations for thousands of years, and even used it to refine weapons like the evil purging divine spears, but no one had ever witnessed such a large-scale eruption of purifying light. Even when Xueqi sacrificed millions of small stone race soldiers to condense a burst of purifying light, that was like comparing a firefly to the bright moon that was the eruption today. The roughly 100 royal lords gathered nearby were the first unlucky ones to be hit. When the light spread out, they were all immediately engulfed by it. The pure light brought endless warmth and brightness to the human race, but it was like the vilest poison to the Black Ink clan. Howling, the royal lords tried to retreat, but the light was everywhere, enveloping them fully. Rich Black Ink strength was continuously bursting forth from their bodies, fighting against the erosion of the purifying light. The light continued to spread out in all directions and countless Black Ink clansmen wailed in agony. The auras of every Black Ink clansman, from innate territory lords, acquired territory lords, to feudal lords, all were visibly weakening at an alarming rate. Meanwhile, the thick Black Ink clouds that had been built up on the battlefield these past months were wiped away, quickly melting away like snowflakes under the scorching sun. The dazzling light soon enveloped the entire battlefield. For every passing moment, the energies in large numbers of Black Ink clan soldiers were purified, causing them to fall in droves. The light gradually faded, and the situation on the battlefield had undergone a remarkable reversal. 30% of the Black Ink clan army that numbered in the hundreds of millions had been wiped out by the eruption of the purifying light, and their previously tight formations were now filled with holes. Worse still, the Black Ink clouds and Black Ink strength that had been accumulating all this time were basically gone. These Black Ink clouds that filled the battlefield had been severely restricting the human race army's performance, creating a hostile environment that hindered their movements. But now, the Black Ink clouds were swept clean, and the terrain advantage that the Black Ink clan enjoyed no longer existed. In terms of environmental advantage, both sides were back now to square one. And all of this was achieved with just one secret technique from Xueqi. It was an astonishing feat. Even though the royal lords, who had been repelled by the purifying light, had suffered severe damage to their foundations, they were now even more determined to kill Xueqi after witnessing her terrifying power. They had no idea where this woman had come from, but they knew she possessed a tremendous power that could completely restrain the Black Ink clan. If this woman was not dealt with, the Black Ink clan would be in great trouble. What was more, the radiance of the wings behind Xueqi dimmed significantly after she brought out that burst of purifying light, and her delicate face was tinged with an unusual scarlet from her exertion. It was obvious that activating such a mighty purifying light explosion came at a cost to her. Now was the time when she was at her weakest. If they didn't kill her now, when would they? So despite being extremely wary of Xueqi, the royal lords still swarmed towards her. They were originally focused on restraining the giant spirit gods, Ade and Aer, but now, all of them had changed targets. Compared to the giant spirit gods, Xueqi was their true nemesis. Figures in all directions rushed towards Xueqi, aiming for her life. Ade and Aer roared in anger, and though they were able to hold down a group of royal lords with their powerful strength, they couldn't stop all of them. Even the group of royal lords that were stopped had volunteered to stay behind to pin down the two giant spirit gods. The remaining royal lords only had Xueqi in their eyes, each one displaying intense murderous intent. Amidst the human race army, many Ninth Order masters grew anxious at this sight. Xueqi was able to change the course of the battle with her power as soon as she appeared. Being able to control purifying light at will was the most vital weapon the human race needed at the moment. If she were killed like this, then even the last hope of the human race would be gone. Even if Xueqi had previously demonstrated strength that surpassed even the giant spirit gods, it was obvious that bringing forth purifying light of such a scale consumed a lot of her strength. While she was now weakened, dozens of royal lords rushed towards her at once, and no one knew if she still had strength left to defend herself with. So just as the royal lords took action, Mi Jingluan roared in anger, "All soldiers, follow me into battle." The massive Pure Yang Pass was the first to charge out, heading directly towards Xueqi while the various armies followed closely behind. Mi Jingluan always had the appearance of a dignified scholar, And he was indeed a resourceful and shrewd man whose greatest strength was his strategic mind. Even in the most critical of situations, nobody had ever seen him lose his cool. Especially now that Pure Yang Pass was considered the human race's command center, it should have been guarded by the human race army while remaining in the rear. However, how could Mi Jingluan care about such things in this critical situation? One could even say that this was a gamble. Pure Yang Pass's mobilization had disrupted the human race Grand Army's tight formation. If they failed to save Zhang Ruoxi now, then the first one to be annihilated when the Blank Ink clan surrounded them would be Pure Yang Pass. However, time waited for no one on the battlefield. Mi Jingluan could not afford to wait and make preparations and plans. Urgently, he compelled Pure Yang Pass forward in hopes that he could arrive at Zhang Ruoxi's side in time. Pure Yang Pass and the royal lords moved at the same time, and Zhang Ruoxi was clearly able to sense this. Understanding what her allies were thinking, she couldn't help but laugh as she called out, "No need to be anxious, Supreme Commander Mi. Since I've come, I have the ability to protect myself. Don't forget, it was Sir who taught me everything I know." While she was speaking, the royal lords had already closed in on her, hoping to kill her off quickly. The royal lords who were wounded by the purifying light did not hold back in the slightest. Each one of the attacks they used was the strongest in their arsenal. Instantly, terrifying powers broke out, and they were all converging on Zhang Ruoxi's position. This was different from their fight with the giant spirit gods earlier, where they were mainly focusing on restraining them. That was because the royal lords knew that trying to quickly kill the giant spirit gods would cost them a lot. The lives of many royal lords would have to be sacrificed if they were to attempt such a thing. What was more, once the Supreme One awakened, what would these trivial giant spirit gods count for? It was with those considerations that the royal lords maintained the intensity of their fight with the giant spirit gods, but they did not reach a point where their lives were put at stake. However, it was different when facing Zhang Ruoxi. Purifying light was something that even the royal lords feared greatly. Either they killed this woman, or they would be the ones to die. That was why no royal lord dared to hold back, and all of them charged at her with all the strength they had.
Martial Peak. Chapter 5971. Personal Guard and Reinforcements. Dozens of heaven-destroying, earth-shattering attacks surged forward, causing even space to shatter, but at the center of this onslaught, Zhang Ruoxi remained calm and composed without any hint of panic. She raised the broadsword in her hand and lightly tapped the void in front of her. As the void warped, a void corridor was instantly formed. No one knew where the void corridor led, but a powerful aura was rapidly approaching from within the dark passage, surpassing even that of any royal lord or Ninth Order master. All the royal lords paled at the sight and became even more fierce in their attacks. However, before their attacks could land, a figure appeared from the void corridor, then two, then three. In the blink of an eye, 8 figures had emerged from the passage, guarding the space surrounding Zhang Ruoxi. Only now did the royal lords who had come close realize the true faces of these unexpected guests. Small stone race masters. Many small stone race soldiers had appeared on the battlefield previously. They seemed to be peculiar creatures controlled by the human race that could fight alongside the humans. However, their strength was not generally too high, and after a series of intense battles, almost all from the small stone race had been killed. Even the royal lords never expected that this woman who appeared out of nowhere could also control the small stone race, and for the small stone race she summoned to be so ridiculously powerful. The aura emanating from each of these small stone race masters was comparable to that of a Ninth Order master, or possibly even more powerful. Moreover, there were 8 of them. These were Zhang Ruoxi's personal guard, a force that had never been seen before. Yang Kai was the only one who knew about the existence of these Ninth Order small stone race masters. When he went to the chaotic dead territory last time, he had experienced their might, and he knew that they were created through the harmonization of yin and yang by Zhang Ruoxi using her Heaven's Order bloodline. However, even Yang Kai did not fully know how many Ninth Order small stone race masters had been born in the chaotic dead territory. He only had an estimate. Back then, he had also attempted to bring them under him through the great sun and moon marks, but he had unfortunately failed. At that time, he speculated that the only person who could control them was Zhang Ruoxi. So, even though he thought it was a pity, he ultimately gave up on them. As it turned out, he was right. There were a total of 8 Ninth Order small stone race masters, and their auras were linked as soon as they appeared, instantly forming a magnificent battle formation.
At the center of this battle formation was Xueqi, who was being protected by them. The eyes of the Ninth Order masters who rushed over were bulging when they saw this, with Yonglai exclaiming, "An 8 trigrams formation!" The simplest battle formations was the 3 fortunes formation, followed by the 4 symbols, 5 elements, 6 paths, 7 stars, 8 trigrams, and finally the 9 palaces. The increase of each stage was based on the increase of cultivators involved. The stronger the battle formation, and the higher the cultivations of those involved, the harder it was to form. Perhaps there were some parties who could cooperate intimately under the high-rank open heaven realms that were able to form the 8 trigrams or even 9 palaces formations. But once the cultivation level reached the high-rank open heaven realms, it was difficult for higher battle formations to be formed. In the existing records, the highest battle formation that 7th Order masters could form was the 9 palaces formation, which was a miracle achieved by the Dawn Squad under Yang Kai's leadership. Besides him, nobody else in the 7th Order had achieved such a feat. Even the 8 trigrams formation was difficult to maintain for 7th Order masters because the pressure on the person acting as the core was too much. Meanwhile, the strongest battle formation that 8th Order masters could form was the 8 trigrams formation, which was used to kill pseudo-royal lords. However, every time 8th Order masters formed such a battle formation, the backlash resulted in some, if not all of them, perishing. From this, it can be seen that it was extremely difficult for high-rank open heaven realm masters to form higher-level battle formations. As for the 9th Order masters, generally, no one would form a battle formation. Not because it was impossible. At the very least, the simplest 3 fortunes formation could be maintained, but because there were only so many 9th Order masters. Even if forming a battle formation could make one stronger, it also consumed manpower and reduced flexibility. The 9th Order masters were already the strongest fighting force of the human race, so rather than concentrating all their power in one formation, it was better to let them act independently, which could better bring out their abilities. Theoretically, however, 9th Order masters should be able to form 4 symbols formations. But anything higher may not be possible unless they had someone like Yang Kai to act as the formation core. With his divine dragon body, he should be able to bear the burden of a 5 elements formation. As for a 6 paths formation, the possibility most likely only existed in theory. But what were the 9th Order masters witnessing at this moment? 8 9th Order small stone race masters had instantly formed an 8 trigrams formation. Even though they were separate individuals, they could perfectly form into a single entity without any strain. Such an incredible feat would be hard to believe if one did not witness it with their own eyes. 8 9th Order small stone race masters joining forces formed an impenetrable barrier around Xueqi. Despite the attacks of the dozens of royal lords connecting as was expected, their heaven-destroying, earth-shattering techniques could not even budge the small stone race in the slightest. One should know that an attack of this level would injure even a giant spirit god. The royal lords were shocked beyond measure, but before they could react, a bright sword beam began to flicker, and the figure of Xueqi, who was protected in the center by her personal guards, suddenly blurred. This just happened to be a moment when the royal lords were putting their all into delivering their most powerful attacks, so they did not have time to circulate energy into defending themselves. As a sword light flickered, black blood and heads flew. In an instant, the auras of nearly 10 royal lords swelled up before fading away. The surviving royal lords all retreated in shock. They had been living in the primordial heaven's source ground restriction for their entire lives, so they had little understanding of the human race. However, they had been fighting against the giant spirit gods for months now, and they had the assumption that the giant spirit gods were the last trump cards of the humans. It was not until this moment that they realized that there was a more terrifying existence in this world besides the giant spirit gods. An existence of this level was something that perhaps only the Supreme One could defeat. The surviving royal lords wanted to escape, but soon enough, they realized that they were not only being pursued by the winged woman, but also by the 9th Order small stone race masters. The moment Xueqi took action, so did the 8, who had formed the 8 trigrams formation. They spread out the battle formation and all charged towards the royal lords. The royal lords were caught in an extremely unlucky situation, but even though they had been injured by the purifying light before, they still had the heritage of royal lords and were not afraid of a single 9th Order small stone race master. However, they soon realized that something was not right as they clashed with these small stone race masters. There was something unusual about the strength displayed by them, and it seemed to far exceed what should be expected. Upon closer inspection,
They were shocked to discover that the aura of these small stone race masters were still closely connected to each other despite the fact that all of them were seemingly fighting alone. Most crucially, their auras were constantly changing and they could form different battle formations at any time or switch which one served as the core of that battle formation at will. The masters who had rushed over to help also noticed this, and all of them had incredulous expressions on their faces because what they saw before them was impossible according to everything they understood. When human race masters formed battle formations, they had to take great care in maintaining the connection of their auras. The worst possibility was if a battle formation collapsed due to the link being broken. Each time humans assumed battle formations, the masters had to divert some of their attention to maintaining its operation. However, when they looked at these ninth-order small stone race masters, it seemed that their control over their auras had reached an instinctual level. They could disperse or form any battle formation in an instant. One might think they were alone, but in fact, they had 7 other brothers behind them who could help to crush their enemies at any time. They were just like parts of a single entity. As the group of human masters watched on, they felt both amazed and ashamed. They had no idea how these ninth-order small stone race masters did it, but they knew that the humans could never achieve such a thing. Even if they had full and complete trust in each other, each individual among their race had their own way of thinking. Even more fundamentally, there were differences in strength and aura among humans, so achieving a perfect balance was just now feasible. The appearance of the 8 ninth-order small stone race personal guard not only helped to relieve Zhang Ruoxi's crisis, but also opened up a counterattack opportunity against the royal lords under Zhang Ruoxi's leadership. But that was not the end of it. The void corridor that Zhang Ruoxi had created with her amazing skills did not disappear. Following closely behind the 8 ninth-order small stone race masters, more of the small stone race soldiers stepped out from it. They continued emerging in an endless stream, too many to even be counted. In just a short amount of time, an army of millions had gathered outside the void corridor. Even though there weren't many masters among them, their numbers were still a sight to behold. And all this was just the beginning. As even more emerged, they soon began covering the void, filling one's field of vision. Previously, when they were facing the constant influx of Black Ink clan reinforcements from the primordial heaven source grand restriction, the human race were at a loss, and there were even those who wished that they had their own reinforcements too. At this moment, that seemingly impossible wish was being fulfilled. Moreover, these small stone race soldiers were somewhat different from the ones that the humans had encountered before. Due to their low sentience, the small stone race acted almost entirely on instinct. This meant that without being refined and controlled by the humans, they were just like scattered sand and it was difficult for them to unleash their full potential in large-scale warfare. However, those that walked out of the void corridor at this moment had formed one imposing and uniform army. The first small stone race army to come out did not blindly charge at the Black Ink clan, but scattered apart to guard the void corridor so that even more of their companions could emerge. It was as if someone was commanding and controlling them. Many human race masters who realized this turned their gaze to the figure who was slaughtering the royal lords and drawing an endless stream of wails from them. She was perhaps the only person who could command and control so many of them. The chaotic dead territory. Mi Jingluan realized where the void corridor led to. For so many small stone race masters to come out, the place the void corridor was connected with had to be the chaotic dead territory, a paradise for the small stone race. According to Yang Kai, the burning light and serene glimmer had nurtured countless of them, and the ones he brought out and handed to the human race were simply scavenged from the chaotic dead territory. Assist them in guarding the void corridor. Mi Jingluan made an immediate decision and changed his previous order. Martial Peak. Chapter 5972. Racial Superiority. Zhang Ruoxi no longer needed help from the humans to save her, but whether it be the void corridor that was connected to the chaotic dead territory or the opening at the primordial heaven source grand restriction, those places needed to be guarded, and they were also the key locations that would help the human race army turn defeat into victory. Everyone was glad since the two entrances were not far away from each other, so they would not have to scatter their forces too much to guard both points. At the same time as when Mi Jingluan gave his order, some of the masters from the Black Ink clan realized that things were taking a bad turn for them. Large armies of small stone race were constantly pouring out of the void corridor that led who knew where. In just a short while, tens of millions of them have come out. If they did not bring down that void corridor, then it would not take very long for the small stone race to even the playing field with them in terms of numbers, and if that were to happen, then it would not simply be the humans that they had to deal with.
While the human race army were rushing to the void corridor, many masters from the Black Ink clan led their own subordinates in the same direction. The void corridor to the chaotic dead territory had instantly become a focal point of the battlefield, catching the attention of millions of pairs of eyes. Even though the human race army moved sooner than the Black Ink clan, they were also further away. So when they were only halfway there, the Black Ink army had already surrounded the void corridor in all directions, but the emergence of the small stone race had also diverted much of their attention, which resulted in the situation becoming much safer for the human race. A war that was even more intense from the fight between the human race and the Black Ink clan broke out. Although the human race army was completely made up of elite soldiers, they were very limited in numbers. During the previous confrontation, the human race army's strategy was to use superior mobility to slaughter as many enemies caught in their path as possible. Rarely would they engage in large-scale head-to-head confrontations with the Black Ink clan. The current situation with the small stone race was different. They were desperately defending the void corridor, so there was simply no way to retreat or escape. Once the Black Ink clan army were to come in from all directions, both sides would immediately break out into a stunning battle. Both sides were like two colliding torrents with countless bodies caught in the rolling waves. Those from the small stone race were constantly incurring casualties, but their numbers were also being replenished continuously. Even though they were far inferior to the Black Ink clan in terms of numbers, with battle formations and momentum, they managed to hold their ground. It was as if there was an invisible hand that was controlling everything about the small stone race, so that these creatures that were supposed to have little sentience and could only act on instinct could now be molded into a single strict army that knew when to advance or retreat. There were not too many masters among the small stone race, and the drawbacks of that were soon apparent. This was Yang Kai's inadvertent mistake when he took so many 8th Order and 7th Order small stone race masters with him on his last trip to the chaotic dead territory, resulting in the small stone race army lacking masters among them. The small number of 8th Order small stone race masters here were no match for the pseudo-royal lords, so no matter how much they replenished their numbers, it took only a few moments of fighting before the Black Ink army were able to find opportunities to rip several openings into their line of defense. Fortunately, the human race army arrived just in time. Under Mi Jingluan's command, the humans immediately split into several groups and plugged into the different openings to fill them. With the help of the 9th Order masters, they were able to hold their line, albeit only barely. The situation was still not looking optimistic. The Black Ink clan army's attack was growing increasingly intense, and if the small stone race army couldn't gather enough mass, then there was still a risk of their lines being broken through. The small stone race in the void corridor were already gathering their troops at the maximum speed possible, but they could only barely keep up with the rate of their casualties. The defensive line kept on shrinking and the space for the joint forces of the small stone race and the human race to move around in was constantly being constricted. Black Ink clan seemed to have found a ray of hope and was attacking more and more aggressively. Originally, Zhang Ruoxi's emergence and ruthless slaughter were enough to deter the royal lords who were eager to attack, and now, no royal lord dared to come out from the Grand Restriction, fearing that they would be killed next. However, one royal lord saw the situation from the opening of the Grand Restriction and rushed out without care to hold back the 9th Order masters and put pressure on the opposing forces. Now, the defense line being held up by the human race army and the small stone race army was in danger of collapsing at any moment. Once the defense line collapsed, not only would they not be able to defend the void corridor, but even the human race army that came to help would also be caught in the Black Ink clan's encirclement. At that point, other than the 9th Order masters who had the ability to escape, the others would all be at great risk. Red-eyed, Ada was fighting a group of royal lords. He had always been silly and foolish, so he was surrounded by the royal lords previously until he was covered in injuries. Now, he only wanted to kill his enemies ruthlessly without a care for anything else. On the other hand, Aer, who was smarter, noticed the situation on the human race army's side, but he was powerless to help even though he wanted to. Just like Aer, he was surrounded by royal lords and was simply unable to divert his attention unless he could get rid of them. The only ones they could put their hopes on, Zhang Ruoxi and her 8 personal guard, were still chasing after the royal lords who had scattered and fled in all directions. There were dozens of royal lords at first, but only a little over 10 of them remained, all of whom were agile with their movements and had good luck, but under her pursuit, they would also fall sooner or later. She did not seem to have any intention of coming to their rescue. Just as the battlefield on the joint army's side reached a limit and their defense was about to collapse, Zhang Ruoxi, who was chasing after the royal lords, suddenly stopped in place and without even looking, lightly clenched a fist in the direction of the void corridor.
With this clenched fist, heaven and earth hummed and trembled. All over the battlefield, yellow and blue lights suddenly started moving. These lights came from the remains of the small stone race soldiers that were scattered among the Black Ink clan army. Since they did not possess flesh, if they were torn to pieces, not a drop of blood would flow out. They would only turn into pieces of stone like this. The power that nurtured them still remained in the debris. It was naturally the powers of the burning light and serene glimmer, the purest power of yin and yang. As the light emerged, all of the Black Ink clansmen who were enveloped by it had frightened looks on their faces. They had no idea what the yellow and blue colors represented, but they had witnessed the power of the purifying light that Zhang Ruoshi had brought forth before. That was why the Black Ink clan had gained an instinctive fear of this strange light. Most of the Black Ink clan were still shocked by the changes around them. A few of the sharper masters wanted to retreat when they noticed the situation turning against them, but how could they have the time to run? The defense line of the human race and the small stone race had been suppressed again and again. The Black Ink clan army surrounded them on all sides and were pressing hard, passing through the remnants of countless fallen small stone race along the way. It could be said that the Black Ink clan's frontline army was now fighting amidst a sea of the small stone race soldiers' broken remains. The yellow and blue colors swirled together, quickly turning into a dazzling pure white light that was scattered at first, but in the blink of an eye, condensed together. The white light was like an ocean, covering the vast battlefield. From within that white light, the countless screams and wails from the Black Ink clan rang out. Regardless of their cultivation, all of their bodies began to sizzle as if they had fallen into a wok of boiling oil, and following that phenomenon, the Black Ink strength in their body began to dissipate and become purified. Those caught in the center of the white light were the most greatly affected, and soon, those with insufficient cultivation perished. Even if some managed to survive, their foundations were severely damaged. The best time to cull them was now, when they were weakened, and the counterattack of the human race and small stone race armies commenced in an instant. The small stone race members were being controlled by Zhang Ruoshi, who naturally would not miss such a good opportunity, and when the humans saw the flowing yellow and blue lights, they realized what was about to happen. After all, they had witnessed this kind of scene before from Yang Kai. So before Mi Jingluan could even give the order, the human race army had already blown the horn to begin their attack alongside the small stone race army. On Pure Yang Pass, Mi Jingluan sighed in his heart. No wonder Zhang Ruoshi said that she was taught everything she knew by Yang Kai. This manner of dealing with her enemies is carved from the same mold. The Black Ink clan army suffered grave losses due to being caught off guard in this unexpected situation, and the troops on the front line were completely annihilated almost instantaneously. Even several of the royal lords, who had jumped into the battle from the primordial heaven's source grand restriction, died in this trap. The defensive line that had been suppressed to the limit began to expand in all directions, and with the collapse of their army in the front lines, the Black Ink clan's rear also quickly withdrew. By the time the dazzling light subsided, the intense exchange of offense and defense had ended as well. The joint army's defense line was restored to its previous state, but they did not continue pursuing the fleeing Black Ink clan. Not because they did not want to, but because they could not. Right now, their main focus was protecting the void corridor that led to the chaotic dead territory. As they watched the small stone race army gather in the void from afar, the Black Ink clan was overcome with grief and anger. The Black Ink clan possessed too many advantages over the humans. They were created from Black Ink nests, so they could be bred in numbers sufficient to crush the humans. Moreover, their Black Ink strength was also extremely disadvantageous for humans. If the humans wanted to fight with them, they had to make all sorts of preparations beforehand. For example, they had to take their purifying Black Ink pills just so they could defend against being corrupted. This was their racial superiority, granted to them by their creator. Nobody could change that imbalance. However, when compared to the small stone race, the superiority of the Black Ink clan crumbled. The small stone race may not be able to reproduce as quickly as the Black Ink clan, but they had an advantage in comparison to the human race. They had no fear of Black Ink strength, and they were even extremely sensitive to it. If nobody was controlling them, then they would simply rush to where Black Ink strength was densest. But what disgusted the Black Ink clan the most was the fact that these small stone race soldiers treated them as mortal enemies when they were alive, and when they were dead, the powers remaining in their bodies could still be drawn out to condense purifying light that perfectly countered Black Ink's strength. Having suffered a huge loss twice already, the surviving Black Ink clan soldiers no longer dared to act rashly. So what if they wiped out those from the small stone race?
Without the ability to dispose of their corpses, the rubble that was left behind was still a great weapon against the Black Ink clan.
Looking from afar, the Black Ink clan army was hesitant to act. The small stone race was beginning to show some unusual movements. Everywhere the human race army was located, a small stone race army would be there, opening up a passage to the rear. Initially, the humans did not understand what they were trying to do, but soon, the humans realized and reacted. The small stone race army had taken the initiative to open a passage to the void corridor so as to allow the human race army to head inside to guard it. At the same time, the small stone race army surrounded the interior, the area around the void corridor, in layers so that the human race army had the chance to recuperate peacefully for a while. Martial Peak. Chapter 5973. Vigorous. This was clearly Zhang Ruoxi's intention. It was simply impossible for those of the small stone race to decide on such an action by themselves with their low sentience. Many of the human race masters were overjoyed. After months of fighting such a fierce battle, they hardly had any time to rest and recuperate. Each army was about to reach their limits, and even the Ninth Order masters were no longer at their peak. Otherwise, Mi Jingluan would not have had the idea of withdrawing the whole army previously. No one could have thought that a safe place for them to rest and readjust their conditions would still be able to exist in the middle of such an intense battlefield. Even though this time to recuperate would not last for long, in these circumstances, any time they had for recuperation was precious. So, after they understood what the small stone race army's intentions were, the human race army did not hesitate to retreat to the direction of the void corridor. The openings were once again filled in by the densely packed troops of the small stone race army. Looking at the small stone race figures that filled the void in all directions, the humans could not help but feel a sense of security, and the tension that had been building up in their minds over months had also eased up completely. A large number of pills were distributed, as well as various combat supplies. This time, the human race no longer held any reservations. They used up all the supplies that they had been saving up since this was their last battle. This battle was about the survival of their race, and if they were to win, they would remain the masters of this world, but if they were to lose, then there would be no humans left. What was the point of rationing supplies at these times? Naturally, they should restore the strength of their army as much as possible in preparation for the final battle. Soldiers of the small stone race were still constantly coming out of the void corridor, and their number was growing bigger and bigger. The surviving Black Ink clansmen would not dare to act rashly anymore. Masters from the Black Ink clan were all looking at the small stone race, all of them feeling a throbbing headache over the situation. Moreover, what they had to deal with now was not only the joint forces of the small stone race and human race army. When Ade and Aer were joined by the 8 Ninth Order small stone race masters on the other side of the battlefield, the royal lords who were attacking the 2 giant spirit gods were caught off guard. They were all so shocked that their souls nearly left their bodies. The 8 small stone race masters had appeared, so that woman must not be far behind. It was only then that the Black Ink clan discovered, to their horror, that all the royal lords who had participated in the attack against Zhang Ruoxi had fallen. This sent chills down the spines of all the royal lords. One had to know that there had been dozens of royal lords working together, and yet such a powerful force had been decimated in such a short time. The number of royal lords surrounding Ade and Aer was not far from the number of royal lords who went to attack Zhang Ruoxi, but their allies had all been killed, so they were probably next on the chopping block. When they noticed Zhang Ruoxi's aura approaching from afar, many royal lords left Ade and Aer and turned around, making for the opening in the primordial heaven's source grand restriction. Together, they instantly broke through the defense line of the small stone race army, and plunged into the grand restriction without even glancing back. For some of them, it had only been days ago they were dreaming of escaping this cage called the primordial heaven's source grand restriction and conquering everything before their eyes. They had waited millions of years for this dream to come true. However, the feelings of joy did not last long. They had now realized that there was no safer place in this universe than the primordial heaven's source grand restriction. Unless the Supreme One woke up, no one could stop that woman's massacre. With nearly half of the royal lords who were restricting them out of the way, and with 8 Ninth Order small stone race masters assisting them, the 2 giant spirit gods turned the tide in an instant. Ada reached out and grabbed a royal lord who was trying to escape and, with a roar of rage, stuffed the royal lord into his mouth. No matter how hard the royal lord struggled, he could not shake off his huge hand. Once he had been sent into the large abyss, Ada bit down on him.
As if he were biting into a worm, black blood spurted between his teeth and the royal lord's aura was instantly obliterated. Ada then roared, venting his anger. He was a powerful giant spirit god. Yet he was being put into such a miserable situation under the encirclement of the royal lords.
This insult was simply unbearable. Aer did not stay idle either. He punched and kicked, each blow appearing simple, but could in fact crush a large piece of the void, blocking the royal lord's plans of escaping. The wings on Zhang Ruoxi's back flapped, sending her across the battlefield as a long pure white band of light trailed behind her in an exceptionally beautiful sight. She did not care about the battlefield where the giant spirit gods were and instead charged straight past it and into the opening of the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction. Many other royal lords were watching the battlefield from within the Grand Restriction, including those who had fled back inside. They thought that they were safe inside the Grand Restriction. But then disaster followed. A commotion erupted at the opening, and royal lords were being slaughtered rapidly, their miserable screams ringing in the void. At the center of the small stone race army's defenses, among the human race soldiers who were recuperating near the void corridor, countless masters looked on in awe at this amazing scene. They had never felt as good and as happy as they were at this moment. Now that gets the blood going. Yonglai quietly wiped the sweat from his forehead as he refined the medicinal efficacies of his spirit pills. Even he did not expect Zhang Ruoxi to enter the Grand Restriction. It was truly an attention-capturing event, especially since that was where the Black Ink clan's mother nest or source was located. Who knew how many royal lords were gathering inside? He had met Zhang Ruoxi a few times before and knew that this woman was very close to Yongkai, but he had never known that she was this powerful. But what tickled his curiosity even more was how this woman's shocking cultivation had come about. The power that she wielded had already surpassed that of the giant spirit gods. There were still an indistinct but large number of figures standing around at the opening, and many more of the Black Ink clan's reinforcements were pouring out to provide support on the battlefield. However, Zhang Ruoxi rushed in and cut them all down like vegetables, sweeping the entrance clean until no more of their figures could be seen, and the Black Ink clan's reinforcements also came to an abrupt halt. It was not until an hour later that a figure emerged from the opening, the wings behind her back still as glossy as jade, a sight that dazzled all that beheld it. Damn woman! Have some consideration for the elderly. The voice of Wu Kuang rang out beside Ruoxi's ears, sounding slightly helpless.
He was tasked with controlling the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction and was united as one with it in a sense, so every time the Grand Restriction was ripped open, he would suffer a certain amount of backlash. The openings that happened previously were mostly done of his own accord, so he could control them to a certain extent. However, when Zhang Ruoxi suddenly rushed in, the large opening in the Grand Restriction had been torn apart 3 times before, and though royal lords could pass through it, it was still not enough for someone like Zhang Ruoxi to pass through. Just now, Wu Kuang had almost shrieked when he saw Zhang Ruoxi rushing over. From his standpoint, it was as if an unstoppable force was charging at him. Even though he expanded the opening as fast as he could, he was still caught off guard by Zhang Ruoxi's sudden charge and he could not regain control for a while. The feeling was just like having his entire being ripped apart. And that was why he had to complain. Zhang Ruoxi smiled, more or less understanding Wu Kuang's meaning. She then apologized. "Forgive me, senior. It was Junior who was reckless." She was strong, beautiful, had a sweet voice and a pleasant demeanor, so what could Wu Kuang say? After holding it in for a while, he let out a sigh and muttered, "You did well." While others could not see what was going on inside the Grand Restriction, he could still feel a thing or two since he was in control of it. Within an hour of Zhang Ruoxi entering the Grand Restriction, no less than 30 royal lords had been executed. As for the weaker Black Ink clansmen, countless had perished. If not for the fact that the Grand Restriction was indeed unsuitable for long fights, Zhang Ruoxi would not have come out so quickly. Instead, she would probably have continued fighting for as long as possible before re-emerging. Senior is too generous. Junior has only done what was necessary. She looked up into the void. In the hour since she disappeared, something else had changed on the battlefield. The most obvious one was the fact that Ada and Aer had finally been freed from their predicament. The 2 giant spirit gods had been besieged by dozens of royal lords and were having trouble getting out, but thanks to Zhang Ruoxi's deterrent, nearly half of the enemies had fled back into the Grand Restriction.
The remaining half were no match for the 2 giant spirit gods and the 8 ninth order small stone race masters and were soon smashed into pulp. At the same time, the small stone race army, which had been guarding the void corridor all this while, began to move as well. Up until then, they had been firmly guarding the space around the void corridor, and even had the strength left to provide a sanctuary for the tired human race soldiers to rest and recuperate. But as time passed, more and more small stone race soldiers emerged from the passage. There were now over 100 million of them, and even more continued to pour out.
No one had any guesses as to just how many small stone race soldiers there were gathered at the other end of the void corridor still.
The number of troops that the small stone race had already surpassed that of the surviving Black Ink clan army. So, they attacked with determination. Divisions of the small stone race army launched themselves like rockets in the direction of the Black Ink clan army, holding them down in an endless spree of slaughter. A battle broke out again, but this time, the attacking and defending parties were reversed. In the short time that passed, the small stone race had already amassed enough forces to confront the Black Ink clan head-on. The Black Ink clan was still massive in number, but they were being purged at an astonishing rate, demonstrating that they were also exhausted and defenseless. The smartest option now would be to make a strategic retreat. But where else could they retreat to other than the Primordial Heaven's Source Grand Restriction? The void within Primordial Heaven's Source Grand Restriction was their home, their foundation, but even if they could escape, the Primordial Heaven's Source Grand Restriction could not move. To retreat back to the Primordial Heaven's Source Grand Restriction, they had to first break through the small stone race army's blockade. As a result, the Black Ink clan army had no choice but to fight. As for the consequences that could arise from killing them, the Black Ink clan lacked the energy to care right now. By the time Zhang Ruoxi showed up, the two armies had already been fighting for a while, and while the small stone race army had suffered some losses, the Black Ink clan had suffered much more than them. This could not be helped as though the small stone race army did not have many masters compared to the Black Ink clan. They had the help of 2 giant spirit gods and 8 ninth order small stone race masters. The Black Ink clan's defense lines held for less than an incense stick of time before the 2 giant spirit gods killed their way through and began wreaking havoc on them. The same was true of the 8 ninth order small stone race masters. Even the royal lords who were lucky enough to survive the initial culling could not hold out long against them. On the other hand, the humans, the ones who started this war, were resting at ease with the strong protection provided by the small stone race army. This gave the ninth order masters that were led by Mi Jingluan mixed feelings in their hearts. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.